Hello and welcome to episode 190 of The Imperial Truth. My name's Greg. Joining me, as always, is Mr. Howard. Hello, Howard.
Hello, Greg. How are you doing?
Not too bad, thank you.
Survived?
Indeed, yeah. Just about. First episode of 2025. As you say, Christmas has been and gone, and New Year's, and lots of time spent at home with toddler. It's amazing how much you don't get done. But hey, what
Oh
can
my
you do?
goodness! Oh my goodness! Wow. Yeah, trying to balance families and tiny person running around. Yeah, that's a whole other ball game, isn't it? When it gets
Indeed.
into that realm. Hence, survived. But yeah, excited for 25.
Absolutely. Before we go anywhere, Element Games for all your Warhammer goodness, Old World goodness. What else did they announce today? We're on this a little bit early. Loads of stuff. Oryx,
Oh yeah.
Blood Bowl, loads of Blood Bowl. Some
Mechanicum
Mechanicum
for legions in
actually
separate
being
boxes.
released, yeah, which is lovely. And yeah, some cool stuff. And some Primark's collections. This will probably all be sold out by the time. Yeah, well, I know because this will come out before the first, so before they're available. So the Primark collections is always tempting for those pictures.
Yeah, that is
Um,
dangerous actually. A3
I,
prints as well, so not little
yeah,
postcards. They're
they're,
pretty, yeah,
if you've
serious
got
business.
a gaming space and you can put things like that up, they're pretty cool.
Hmm.
Um, but hey, yeah, but you might not be able to get them through Element, but you can get all your plastic toys, your glue, your magnets, your whatever it is you need via Element Games. And if you use the code, you support the show. Thank you for anyone who's done that with their Christmas money over the period. I certainly went on there after seeing what I didn't get and planning some purchases. Um, always good. Always good. Who else we got? We've got Warhammer merch. If you want jumpers, Joy Toy figures, you name it, there are a lot of different options on the Warhammer
Toys
merch.
Heresy range is becoming
25.
quite substantial now, isn't it? It's pretty cool.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a bit, I think. Calendars. Loads of calendars on there. Don't know if they're going to come
Hmm.
down in price anytime soon, but you can get loads of calendars, um, t-shirts, mouse pads, you name it. They've got Space Marine 2 stuff, which is still a super cool game, even though I don't really play online. And yeah, awesome. Who else is there? A good amount of support. Battlebling, if you are going to order some 3D printed parts, particularly for your
Hmm.
Titans or for anything else they do, really, then we've got a link for that as well, which just
It's a
gives us
little
a bit
bit,
of a
yeah,
kickback.
kickback and a discount for those using it as well. And yeah, that will pretty handy for those going to Britannicus events such as the Beachhead event coming up in
Yeah,
beginning of Feb.
indeed. And we say this because there are hosting costs and things like that, and that's what all this money goes to. When GW sends us some models and I send them on to Howard, posting big boxes isn't cheap anymore, particularly ones that you want to make sure get there. Um,
Yeah.
particularly when they've been given to you with an NDA on, we have to make sure they get there, that kind of thing. So it just helps cover all those costs, which is fantastic. Thank you for anyone who uses any of those links. It is really appreciated. So, Howard, did you get any hobby done in amongst the toddler wrangling?
Sort of is the short answer to that. In a roundabout way, I, as a little Christmas present, um, went and jumped in with someone. I had a conversation with someone who was selling on some bits, and they had been hanging around a bit on one of the Facebook sites. And I got in conversation with them, and they actually had a few other bits that they want to sell. Ended up being a sizable package being sent over from Finland. There was a bunch of bits in there, and they didn't necessarily travel well. Some very nicely painted bits that are tied in with what I already have, and with increasingly little time to do the painting that I would like to do, it was quite nice to have some that are already done. Great. But as I say, they didn't make it in the best of condition. So my hobby time was spent bringing them back up, finding the odd snapped off arm, or some of the more worrying things where the sort of the trim on a Terminator Praetor shoulder pad had snapped or broken in some way. And you think, oh god, found the tiny piece in there and just gluing that on so it was seamless.
Or
A sword being broken in half. Oh god. Considering where it had come from, he couldn't have packed it any better. But actually, I quite enjoyed it. It almost treated it almost like a little sort of restoration type thing, and was very happy with the way they all came out. So that was the principal part of me doing hobby. I've got a couple of projects now on the bench that are going to be a bit bigger. A couple of things to work on, but new things. But that was the main bit of hobby I've done since we've last spoken, was restoring others and trying to move into a new hobby space, because baby number two on the way, as I mentioned, I've now finished a building outside, a kind of grand shed kind of thing, that I'm going to be moving all that I can out to it. And weirdly, I've spent a bit of time setting up a bookshelf.
oh,
We've got some bookshelves, and finally, I've been getting out the Black Library collection. It's deciding which of those things I actually want to keep and which of those things
yeah,
are pointless, having them in the back of a cupboard.
cool.
There's things from Black Library, from the first Black Library weekenders, where I was picking up hardbacks and things. I thought, this is insane. This is ridiculous having these things and I'm carting them around. I've gone through 3 or 4 house moves. What am I doing? So I'm picking the best ones, putting those up on the bookshelf, and feeling quite nice actually having those out now, actually enjoying them on the shelf and making me, in particularly the reference type books and things. It's nice to have them out and kind of curate them. So there's quite a bit of time. Does that count as hobby?
Yeah, why not?
What about you? Did you get anything done?
No.
Fair enough. Yeah,
Um,
fair enough.
so I was supposed to go to that Blood Bowl event. Ended up working through being rather ill, having our stock take. I was supposed to be missing the Saturday of a stock take because I was at that event, but we started on the Friday night, so it's cool. So did quite a bit Friday evening. Worked to the point where I was like, yeah, I'm not even going to make it into this Blood Bowl event, so I didn't even go to it. So that Blood Bowl team still isn't painted. Um, I did get some kill team stuff which I built, some blooded, and that's been about the extent of my hobby. Preparing stuff to sell. When I find some time, we've been busy in the evenings. We're not normally that busy in the evenings, or we're just shattered. So yeah, getting away during the day is nigh on impossible over this period to like squirrel myself away. So the first night I get to do anything, I've got to record. Sod's law, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
But it's what we do. It's what we do. So yeah, not a lot. Didn't even get a chance to read much, which was a bit of a shame because some stuff I wanted to read. And yeah, just I did go and see Wicked last night, which I can
I
thoroughly
have also seen
recommend.
that. It's the first time we've been to the cinema in
A
oh
while.
goodness knows how long. Certainly the two of us together. It was a rare date night with grandparents stepping in to look after the little man.
I,
We did exactly the same. That was our chosen one, and thoroughly enjoyed it.
I think Emma's seen Wicked the musical like about 2 or 3 times, 3 or 4
Impressive.
times, and her little face lighting up during the songs was well worth it. She's going to see it again next Friday.
Nice,
As soon as it finished, I
nice.
was like, "When are you going to go and see it again?" With my mum next Friday, so that's cool. And I think we'll take the boy to Moana too. Um,
Oh yeah.
New Year's Day, I think, because he's quite good with sitting through films and he loves Moana. So we will try that. But in terms of being, again, as I say, being able to get away and do hobby stuff, what happened? I'm like, take the boy out, go meet your friends. We're going to meet some of her friends tomorrow. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, they're your friends. So, do I have to? Oh, no, I have to be there. Okay. Um, I had a bit of that conversation actually with us. Like, so there's an event in February that I went to last year, and she's like, "Are you all you are definitely going to Chicago in April, aren't you? In March, late March." Oh yeah, okay. So I'm not
Ouch.
going to Beachhead then. Okay, cool.
Ouch. Yeah, that's fairly clear.
Yeah, not this year anyway. So. although I still haven't
Answers
bought
that
my
question.
tickets to Adepticon. So yeah, it's not been the bestest hobby period. I did get the new D&D player's handbook for a new campaign. I think we're going to use the new rules for. So I've been
Nice.
like reading a little bit of that because I can put it down after 2 pages, not a problem. Yeah, disappointing a little bit, but I also need to. It doesn't help that the office where I do my painting has got all the Christmas decorations that have just come down in it that need to go up and be put away, plus loads of stuff that we're storing because it's still a bit of a mess out there, and we've changed around the living room post Christmas, and a desk that's full of stuff. So there's a lot that needs to be done. But hey, that's this period of time. You can lose it, can't you, very quickly. Back to work on
You really can.
the second, and yeah, cool, yay. So
And then you're just back into it. But then in some ways, then it returns to a normal timetable, and maybe you can squeeze some in that way.
yeah, but Emma could have taken the boy out to see someone all day while I had a day off, couldn't she? I have got
There is that.
some days I've carried over, which they want us to take early next year because we're really quiet at the start of the year. So I've got a hospital appointment and dentist appointment. But I might take like the whole day off and have half a day to myself because I've got to. Don't have a choice.
I've got, yeah, I'm
So
trying to
Emma can't
angle for
really
a
have a
couple
go
of
at me.
those.
Mind you,
Trying to angle for
every
a couple
time
of those this week.
every time I do that, there's a whole list of jobs to do. So
You won't quite.
okay,
Yeah. Probably
is what it is.
procrastination. Well, the best thing is have
Mm.
those jobs which might make you more inclined to procrastinate with hobby, rather than having hobby planned and then
I don't
procrastinating
get
pointless
choices on
other
those
jobs.
jobs.
Oh, okay. So,
No, it'll be, why
say
haven't
no
you
more.
done this? Why won't you do that? Okay, yes, dear, yes, dear. Bless her. No, it's not too bad. But yeah, I think we'll get into maybe. I mean, she's gone out tonight, and we're maybe getting a little bit more of the evening. Also, I mean, the boy's losing. Oh, we're getting right off course here, but the boy's losing his nap, which is
Oh, game
heck of
changer.
fun. Oh yeah, my word, these last 4 or 5 days have been hard at times. But hopefully that might mean he settles a bit earlier, and then all of a sudden we can find an extra half hour at night, that kind of thing, which would help big
Does make
time.
quite a big difference. Yeah, yeah. Yes, as
We'll
you say,
see.
we're getting off track. We will come. Yeah, but
We're known for it.
so
It's fun.
no, January's going to be a completely different thing. Of course, we'll have
Oh,
loads of
absolutely. Yeah,
hobby
next year is
to
the
report.
year, yeah, 2025. It's the year of the big projects, getting everything done, like every year before it. Cool. Anything else before we move on?
No, I think that's it for
Right.
depressingly. That's it for hobby progress.
Let's take a break and we'll come back and talk about what GW been up to. Just having a look back over what GW have shown us this last month. First off, there's an April Warhammer World Match Play Heresy event, The Tides of War. 1,500 point army in 3 games over 1 day on Thursday, the 3rd of April. So another one of those midweek events. So if you can be free during the week, that could be quite fun. Match play events, Heresy match play style events at Warhammer World can be hit or miss a little bit, just depending on which opponents you get, I think. But if you're around, particularly if you're nearby, right, Bonza. It's
Cool that
been a
it
while
exists.
since,
Yeah.
yeah, it's been a while since I played any event at Warhammer World because the tickets are just that much to get hold of. But
There was a couple of events relatively recently. I seem to remember. I just seem to be aware of a lot of people preparing. A lot of people who I follow on Instagram and Facebook and similar, who were preparing armies for events, and there was a definite uptick in heresy things happening recently.
there were 2 or 3 weeks
Relatively recently.
apart. So Greetings from the
Yeah,
Warp usually have their doubles early December, and there
yeah.
was I think I want to say attrition was like the week after or week before, which
Right.
when you got two events like that, they can sometimes magnify like what's
Mm,
going
mm.
on. I think there was other stuff as well. I think there might have been a Warhammer World one, but I can't remember.
That was the one I was
Yeah,
thinking of. I was just sort of a couple
yeah,
of things, like 3,000 point lists kind of being put together.
right. But yeah, I mean, there's so few people comparatively to what there used to be at these events. It can feel a bit. So sometimes there can be no one you know there,
Mm.
whereas there was always a few at least.
No one
But
you know yet.
yeah. Well, yeah, true. But no one I know if I'm not attending them. Therefore, I don't even really realise it's happening. But anyway, we did
Get
get
you.
some models shown off. We have the Iron Warriors Warsmiths.
I think December actually ended up being quite a cool one with
So
these
do
of
I.
which I mean I'm biased because I really like those Iron Warriors ones, and
Well,
Iron
I
Warriors
think
are a focus for me at the moment, but I think they're
we'll
pretty damn good.
we'll talk about that a little bit when we do the review of
All right.
stuff. But how we look at kind of releases and how we feel it's supported, because I think there's some. It was interesting to look back actually, but yeah, these Iron Warriors Warsmiths. What do you think?
Love it. I thought the iconography of it, the styling of it, was a very good example of what it's tempting to say a Praetor is, but it's actually more a specific, a Legion specific console equivalent, a Warsmith in this case, could do. I mean, I thought there's a lot of the detailing that made these things look quite cool and menacing, as
Mm.
always with their recent releases. The heads are cool. I'm not a huge fan of the size of the head of the hammer. I feel like that's a bit extreme. Every other
I
detailing
mean,
on
it's a
there,
grav.
I rather like. Yeah, I get it, but I just think it just makes it look over as a silhouette. I mean, I'm looking at it
Sure.
again now. It's a little bit extreme. Um,
To
I
make
get
that
what it
much,
is, but
yeah, I get you. To make that much smaller, the way it's got to fit in with the other graviton could be
yeah,
then seen to be a bit lacking. Luckily, I mean that's the easiest part of this whole miniature change, isn't it?
by
Um,
far.
snap the hand off if you want, cut the hand off, put a new hand on, or just um, cut across and pin in a new weapon.
I think that's good on the head. I mean, it looks like it could be bigger than the head of it only. It could be bigger than the head of the graviton hammer, whatever it's called, on the iron circle automata. It just looks like it's
Oh
got
yeah,
more to it. It looks chunky. It's more like the one on
sure. It
um
might just look that because of
the
the size of
mechanical
the
thing.
model.
Could
I wouldn't
be,
be surprised if
could
it's
be.
the same. But yeah, I think the standing still one, the stock one,
Yeah,
is fantastic.
yeah.
The head doesn't scream Iron Warriors to me. The helmetless head. But yeah, whatever, cool. It's another cool head. Whether you like it for Iron Warriors or someone else, it's there to use. I like the fact that you don't have to do much to make it a non-Iron Warriors
Mm,
tech machine or something, or um, yeah, not much you need to take off that to bring it to another Legion.
mm.
Uh, I think it's a really sweet model. The the walking forwards one I like slightly less, just on the pose, but that's the one that's available at Warhammer World only, isn't it?
Irritatingly, I like them both.
Oh yeah, don't get
Which
me
is
wrong,
make
it's
it
not
tempting.
bad.
No. By the way, I don't. I catch where you're being cautious with the way you say it. But as you say, if you had to pick one, I
Oh
think
yeah,
I agree. I think the one particularly for what a Warsmith is, sits well. I'm amazed it was two different kits
strange, isn't
that they
it?
had to do the two different versions of that.
I wonder if they just couldn't decide and were like, stuff it, we'll make an exclusive one that
I
we can do
suspect so. Hmm.
limited runs in here. Um, which yeah, cool.
Do
Oh yeah,
you
and
think the hazard stripes on the pole on the shoulder are molded on or painted on?
uh, hard to tell.
It is, isn't it?
'Cause you've
I
got,
can't quite tell.
is that a gap between the black and the yellow, or is it
Is
black?
it painted? Yeah, I
I,
suspect they're molded on.
I think they are, which
Again,
isn't a problem.
pretty easy. No, it's not. It's pretty easy, but that's just one of those things that I would that they do. I don't personally like. I prefer the hazard stripes to be painted on
sure.
rather than molded on. And it's another thing that would be
Uh,
as an extra step to Iron Warriors it potentially.
As a lazy painter, as a space wolf, I paint them Hazard Warriors. I paint Hazard Stripes. They're not for Iron
Absolutely,
Warriors
and
only.
there's plenty of, isn't it?
Yeah.
Exactly, plenty of
Just
legions that would
realised.
do that. But
Yeah, I just realised he's got plates on the forearm, hasn't he, with a number 4 on it as well that need to come off.
still pretty
If you take it,
straightforward,
but
though, isn't it? Like you
it's
say.
very little if you want to move
Yeah,
it all. But yeah, no, fantastic models. I really like them. Um,
yeah, I think they nailed that.
and then what else did we get? We got the Iron Hands one as well. Legion Praetor.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just because it's Iron Hands. Like it feels like there's a lot going on.
Mm.
Um, I think the armor style of the armor plate with the bionics and things. It's not your regular silhouette, is it?
No, and I find I don't know. Is it the helmet and the head? There's it looks visually quite busy, so it's quite hard to pick. Which I think might have something to do with. I think a different paint job would be more forgiving because it's got
Maybe.
that slight metallic sheen to the black in the paint job that you see online. It, I think, is quite hard to read. I think there will be paint jobs that will make that easier to read and therefore stronger. But it's visually busy, but
Maybe.
that's kind of what they're about, isn't it?
Yeah, I think you've got this plated armor with the bionics head on it. Those bionics would stand out more with less
Mm.
plated armor because it draws. The problem is your eye, when you look at it, your eye is scattering around the whole model because there's, as you said,
Yes.
there's a lot going on. I think if that was a more standard armor mark, your eye would be drawn down to that leg more and up
Yes.
to whatever's crawling on his back and the other bits and pieces. And that's it's just an Iron Warrior thing, where I'm sure some people like it. I like the helmetless head. I think that if
I
we
like them
had the main
both,
photo with
actually.
the helmetless head, it would
Mm.
draw your eye more because it would stand out more
Mm.
in that.
Mm.
Like the helmet molds into whatever's going on behind it.
Mm.
That helmetless head could very easily be put onto something like an Iron Warriors Praetor, Iron
Mm.
Warriors Warsmith, and work very well as well. Um,
I think there's a couple of bits in it which there's a choice there to pick out all the trim in a different colour, in this case silver or
mm,
iron. I think if that wasn't done, um, you just have that all as one colour.
maybe.
I think that would actually make it visually easier to read. And I see equally, I think that little cyber familiar thing coming up over his shoulder, which I think is cool. I wonder if that's a piece that could be removable
Yeah, I'm sure it is.
because that
I'm sure.
equally is that similarly is drawing the eye in a certain way, and I think there's
Yeah,
perhaps another way of including that.
you are drawn from the bottom left and to the top right. You're drawn across that diagonal between those
Yeah.
two pieces, and then your eye flicks elsewhere. It's like the right arm being mechanical. It took me a while to realise that because there's so much else that I'm looking at.
Mm.
But again, I wonder if the model's in your hand, if that's anywhere near as much of an issue as it is in
I
that photo.
particularly think this would have been something that would have lent itself really well to having the resin on show. The bare
Yeah.
resin, I think that could have looked super cool. And I bet seeing
Mm.
that in person with those mechadendrites forming around it, I think, because those are always cool on these models. Um, I like it. I think, but I just agree. It's not an out and out. There's just some things you're like, whoa, okay, there's a lot
Mm.
going on here.
Okay. We go
Would love to
slightly
see it.
different. Yeah, we go a slightly different turn then with the Legion Overseer.
Wasn't expecting this. Real
Oh, I
surprise for
don't think
me to
anyone was
see this.
expecting it. What do you think?
I think it looks like a chaplain.
I think a lot
um,
of chaplains are going to be made from it.
yeah, I yeah, I think it's fine. Um, I think it's. I don't really know what else to say. I think the helmet is a choice. I see the retro reference that it's
Mm.
doing. I don't personally like that. I think the armor's cool. I like its. There's a definite design language that they're applying to what they describe as sort of a loyalist version of things, which they typically paint as Imperial Fist, but could lend themselves to a bunch of the different loyalists. Um, which the Legion champion, I think, has got a similar Loyalist Legion champion has got
Yeah.
that similar kind of heroic feel. So I'm really interested. I think the one that will be more exciting will be
The
the
traitor one.
Greater Overseer. I think that will be a
Yeah.
cooler
How much is
model.
he
I'm not as
inspiring?
personally excited. Yeah,
Yeah, how much is he inspiring, and how much is he cajoling
yeah,
for a traitor
yeah,
one?
yeah.
Mm,
Which I would imagine there's going to be a much more threatening
mm.
sense, which will somehow will mark it out. Like I say, the fact that this says chaplain more to me. I like the unhelmeted head more than the
Yeah.
helmeted one. I think that says a lot more about this piece. I think that would work quite well. Um, Not super exciting personally, but cool enough model.
It's got to be resin, isn't it? Yeah.
But these all are. I think. I
Yeah.
think they
I mean,
are.
it doesn't say it.
They
That's
are.
the one thing.
Oh,
But
does it
they're
not? Okay.
like, no, 99% sure that's going to be resin
Yeah.
because they're not going to sell bucket loads of these, are they?
Yeah.
But I think as a basis for other models, like just taking the body
Yeah.
and going from there, I think there's a lot you could have fun with for specific legions. Because I mean, the fabric covering the groin area uh,
Mm.
maybe puts off some legions, but a little bit. But I think there's it's not a model that makes me want to rush out and buy it immediately. But
No.
as I look at it, yeah, it's definitely more second ed than seventh ed as a
Mm.
figure, and as a basis for a chaplain, I think it's got a lot that speaks for it.
There's elements of it that are cool, but it's just as a
Yeah,
whole,
it's not
it
bad.
doesn't.
Again,
It's
it's
not
not a bad
super
myth, but
exciting. I think it
doesn't
suffers slightly from being Mark 6, actually. Mark 6
maybe.
ish armor, albeit artificer version of that, but that's perhaps why it's not because they've done a few of those, and as a
Yeah,
particular console type, there's not enough really to set him apart as something else. I think it's a
no.
hard design brief, whoever got to do this, to
The
make this
problem
sort of
is
stand out.
if a model now doesn't reach out and grab you from the screen
Yeah,
and
yeah,
pull you in,
well
then
said.
it's hard to then get overly excited about it. It's like, cool, it's
Mm,
another model that we can use in our game. That's really cool. And that's not. It's like when saying something satisfactory.
mm,
Sometimes we see that as a negative. Satisfactory by definition is not a negative. It just
mm.
doesn't go those extra steps that you hope everything does, which everything can't do. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, but
Damned
on the
with
other,
faint praise, that sort of thing.
indeed, yeah. On the other side of things, we got a little bit more of a look at some of the sonic weaponry for 40k.
Yes.
And if you're going to be doing late, a late heresy, or not even that late, but a properly fallen aspect of your Slanesh army for Emperor's Children, then my word, you're going to have some fun stuff to play with, aren't you?
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed.
I
The
mean,
armor I thought was all that we've seen previously. I think there's some other. I think you're going to have
yeah,
some cool things there. Similarly, I've seen a lot of people using the Berserker kit,
yeah,
current 40k Berserker kit, as a basis for a
I
certain
think,
scale.
mm,
These chunky things with lots of dynamism to them, being used as Sons of Horus Reaver attack
Reese,
squads.
yeah.
Loads of people doing that. There's a few of them I've seen that are doing cool things with that, and I wonder if the Emperor's Children is going to be the same. The Emperor's Children kind of Legionnaires equivalent.
I think it will. Like again, you got the helmets that were showed off. There's some,
Mm,
again, depending on your era and how deep you want to go, your mileage is going to vary. But yeah, I think the upscaling of the armor marks has had a real
mm,
positive effect on that, which is weird because, well, it's not weird, but it's slightly humorous in that it appears that they're pushing even further with their diversification of lines, and
mm.
now people are going to be going in and going, yeah, I want that 40k, that definite 40k kit for my heresy stuff.
Yeah,
Which kind of counters what they have been doing. But
Well,
Brilliant.
like we
And
said
then,
last time, same with the Krieg. It was the same. There's actually going to be a whole bunch of people who can use that now for militia or Imperial Army and
people have
stuff.
been
And you're like, yeah, great.
people have been doing that for years, and surely they must know that the amount of people who've done 40k armies with loads of Warhammer bits in, or taken 40k models and done bits to them to make them fit into 30 into fantasy. But hey, it is what it is. But then we got the big one on Christmas Day. I was a
Mm-hmm.
bit surprised.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't really
Me
think
too.
about it. What do you think?
I thought they'd hold him back. I thought they'd release an image of an army set, and they sort of flipped that and said, no, that'll be later. I like it. I've had to really look at them, and I was like a lot of people, and people I've spoken to, I was sold. I was very tempted by the very fact that it's plastic. The more I've
Sure.
looked at them, design wise, actually I do quite considerably more than I expected prefer the resin one. But plastic is awful tempting.
This is part of it, right? I've seen lots of people talking, and there have definitely been those people who are like, "Oh, nowhere near as good as the resin. Like, get in the bin." And it's not very good. It's like this is a fantastic model. It is
by
an
any
absolute
by
brilliant
any
model.
measure, completely
Yeah,
agree.
and it's plastic, and it's cheaper, so it's easy to work with, and it's cheaper, and it's easier to travel. But by gods, it doesn't touch Fulgrim Transfigured.
Organ transfigures.
And
When you particularly
and
see the two next to each other, you really dive into them. They
yeah,
are
and
quite
that's
distinct.
yeah, and that's, I mean, you could, but in my opinion, you could say that about a whole host of models. They're
Mm,
not Fulgrim transfigured. Like,
mm, mm,
it's
mm, mm.
it's Crawley Town and not Arsenal Football Club when they play on the same pitch. It doesn't mean that the people who play for Crawley aren't any good. Just means they're not, you know, they're not the biggest, baddest of the lot. I just think he's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, no,
My
I
biggest
agree
bump
with that.
buddy.
I would love to see it. I'd imagine this is very much one of those models that the photos can't do it justice
Well,
in the same way.
again, but the one thing I'm not sure about with him are the faces. But even on the
Okay.
main picture where you got the big picture of him, the face doesn't look
Mm,
as. When you zoom in on these parts, you're going to highlight slight weirdnesses or what have
mm.
you, because they're not supposed to be looked at like that. But yeah, I think the face is the biggest kind of thing where it's like, yeah, but for me, Fulgrim, 412 Sam's Fulgrim is phenomenal,
Yes, it is. Yes, it
and
is. I think it's quite. I almost think they could have taken this one because they make the point of saying that this is what they touch on it in the reveal article that this is what happens after 10,000 years of being in the warp kind of thing, saying this is an even more demonic version of the same principle that is demonic Fulgrim. It's very similar in that respect. It doesn't. I actually think they could have taken it even further with some of those more demonic parts. I do think, as you say, the face, the head, it doesn't. There's only really one of those heads. I think it works for me. That appeals. There's one that stands out to me. The helmeted thing is quite cool. I'm quite cool that I'm quite glad they did a helmeted version as part of this.
very
I think
different,
there's a
isn't it?
fifth head which we haven't seen. Yeah, there's a
Right.
fifth one we haven't. I think they mentioned four unhelmeted heads, and there's only three, I think, shown in the article. Um, Probably.
5
I
different heads, yeah.
Yeah. There's more
Unless
of a
the
rage
one
one.
in the main picture is,
Maybe the one in the main picture is a different one because that's a more
I
angry
think
head,
it
whereas the
is
others
definitely a
aren't.
different one. It's more of a
Yeah,
vampire look than the others. And
yeah,
and
yeah,
actually, that is the head I like the most. I can't see it
yeah. I
properly.
think you're right. I think you're right. Actually, no, I say that of the four that they show further down, it's the bottom right one. I thought of the unhelmeted
Right,
head
yeah,
with the sort of gleefully. No, the other
yeah.
two I think look strange. He looks confused or oddly amused. Anyway, whatever. I'm splitting hairs. I think it's a cool model, and I think. Would you be tempted if you were a hardcore Emperor's Children fan to have both?
Yeah.
One to have and enjoy, one to be able to actually take places without fear that you're
Well,
going to snap those wings.
yeah, I think it depends where you're going, right? It depends what you're
Mm,
doing. Don't get me wrong, this plastic model's not going to be cheap, but
No.
if you're going to an event where it's going to be a lot of people, space is tight, people might be a little bit like careless. I've seen people
Mm.
drop their hard case, open onto another person's model. Club members, in fact,
Jesus.
and go, "Oh, sorry." It's like, well, too late then, and they were just plastic models. If that happens on Fully Transfigured, he's not gonna give you the money to replace it and to replace the time you
Yeah.
spent
And
doing it.
the charge for the time, yeah,
Yeah,
quite.
exactly. So yeah, like almost why not? Are people gonna take Fulgrim in an army? Is a different thing. Uh, I do like the fact that I see for some reason my internet is not wanting to load the Warhammer page. No, 504 error on Warhammer.com. That's good. Might be why I wasn't getting that. But I do like the idea to have the skin pulled back on his belly, should we call it?
Mm.
Is
Oh yeah, that's pretty grim. I hadn't noticed that before. That is quite grim. If you go to town on that and paint that in a certain way, that could be
yeah.
horrendous. I
I
mean, I
mean,
was focusing on the demonic part of the actual snake,
yes.
but actually, that's particularly
But that
unpleasant.
is
Yeah.
his own skin pulled back, and there's some people making allusions to that is his groin, and it's like, well, I mean, he's a demon at this point, which makes it
Mm.
even sicker. But yeah, it's like there's some crazy stuff going on in this. I like aspects of the tail, the spines, and the. I'm just trying to remember if Fulgrim has. Um, yeah, there's more of a claw on the end of the tail, more of the classic
Mm.
pincer that
The
the
crustacean
keepers,
kind of look to it, yeah.
yeah, that the keeper of secrets have,
Mm.
which is nice. And he's got a thingy's weapon, hasn't he, that he made for him?
Fireblade, yeah.
Yeah,
Ferris
Fireblade,
Menace's
which
Fireblade,
is
yeah.
super cool. But yeah, I think it's a fantastic model, and I think if this had come out first, like people, you'd be amazed at it. Um,
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the other one came out first, and again, it's a really cool model, but it's hard to look past the one that came before.
Yes, you can't
And
see it in
that's a curse,
isolation
right?
anymore. Yeah, you can't see it in isolation. It does bode very well. Now you say that, particularly with that detail, it does bode well for the rest of the range, which it shouldn't have been a surprise, really, in some ways, because what they've done with Slanesh and Age of Sigmar, for example, they haven't held back with that. They haven't
Oh no, I mean this
tidied it up or anything. There's some pretty grim. I mean, that thing where there's the heart
harp
made
coming
out of
out
the
of his back.
guy's back. Yeah, that's
It's
pretty horrendous.
not even just Slanesh. You look across the whole range.
Agree. Yeah.
They've never taken a step back. They might not
No.
have bare breasts on models. That's a marketing thing, but also that's such a small part of what
Yeah.
Grimdark and Slanesh for XS is. And actually, I think even if it wasn't a marketing ploy, just making sure that you're not crossing that line so that online people aren't like, Slanesh sex, it's like, no, like it's probably the most boring aspect of Slanesh that people
Mm.
focus on, and it gets written about in books because it's um,
Well, it's the most
it's a story
one-dimensional, isn't it?
driver. Yeah,
It's the most one-dimensional aspect of it. It doesn't enrich it in any way. It does. It keeps it
no,
one-dimensional,
it can
one-note
have
kind of
its
thing.
uses, but
Yeah, I
yeah, to
mean,
go,
use it as an example of a multifaceted thing. But it's the touches on here that there's some design moves they've made in here, knowing how good they are as a design house. In particular, there'll be a design team will have been deployed on this, and I mean that across all their different disciplines that they cover,
mm,
that will then have brought some very cool. They'll have really thought through, I would imagine, what Slanesh as a design language is, and carried that through into those other models. So I'm kind of excited now to see what they do, because it sounds like there's quite a few models coming. They've kind of got the Legionnaires, which are your basic guys. Then you've got Noise Marines, and there's something more than that. There's kind of the Cacophony
yeah.
extended version of them. So this could be quite a cool range, and then what
Oh,
that could give people as a thing to pillage could be ideal.
and now it's much easier to paint those tones. So
Mm.
10 years ago, 20 years ago, trying to paint purple fading to white. You had 3 colours basically GW would give you, and now GW are giving the extra paint models, and then all the other paint companies,
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
it's
There's now
way
things
less
like 7 different speed paint kind of versions.
exactly, it's way less intimidating than it was. So
Yeah,
I can
yeah.
see us getting more 40k people involved. I know lots of people who are very keen to do this, and that feeding over potentially into Heresy as well, like bringing their big snake dude
Mm.
to Heresy in plastic. I don't care if you put this on the table as Fulgrim. It's Fulgrim. I don't care if you bring Angron when there's the demon Angron. It
Yeah,
doesn't really
yeah,
matter.
I
I
agree with
get
that.
it. We haven't all got a lot of money, right? Sometimes, I don't even know how much Fulgrim Transfigured is. It ain't gonna be cheap,
I
right?
want to say, I want to say 200 quid, but it's a lot.
Yeah. But also, I don't want to work with resin all the time, and I don't blame anyone who does. Who sits there and goes, "No, not doing it. It's resin." Resin. Some people can say, "Oh, resin's much better." It's like, yeah, you get different detail. £182,
Right.
but I don't like working with resin. I find it horrible. The fact you've got to bend wings and stuff like that, when I can just clip it off a sprue, scrape it with a knife, put it together.
Oh, relative to plastic, it is a harder to
Terrible.
work with material. That's just factually.
And
There's
and
more
that's
steps you have to go
that's
through. Of
before you
course, there
have
is.
something like a long spear that he's holding, which is just going to bend to heck,
Yeah.
and all that. So yeah, yeah, it's exciting times. Made me think though, we haven't had a Primarch since Fulgrim, which was over a
No.
year ago.
No.
So or revealed over a year ago. So what's Sam been working on?
Yeah. 2025. You would hope, wouldn't you? There might be
What are we gonna
something out
get?
there.
What do you reckon? Because there was some chat
The
about it a while
Khan is
ago, wasn't
tempting.
there?
The Khan is tempting to say because
I
he's an
don't think it'll be the
obvious.
Khan.
Because he's so recent.
No, I think they kind of intimidated that wouldn't be the Khan, but could be wrong. Do
The
they
only
carry
reason I
on?
say that is because they've said they're going to do empowered, for want of a better word, or sort of up powered versions of them of the Primarchs. All 18 are going to get another version.
I don't think it's all
And in
up
the case of the
powered.
Loyalist, is it not? I thought it was the
No,
phrase they used, as
no.
in.
I think it's just 18. There will be versions of the 18 Primarchs. I think some of them will be up powered, but I don't think you're not going to get an up powered
Okay.
Rust. I don't think that's going to happen. I think you'll get a
No,
different
I
one.
suppose it's a different one. I suppose it's
Um,
a poor
the,
choice of
the
words I've used
the
there.
problem is you expect to get an up powered a demonic Angron, a demonic Mortarian, because they've shown that they're going to do the demonics of each. We've
Mm.
already got Horus, so you're going to get those. Perturabo doesn't fall till after the heresy. Lorgar transfigured.
No, but
But,
there is a
but
difference. There is the way, and I remember reading this recently. The way he's described differently. He's got a greater stature. He's got more
yeah,
weaponry
true.
on him. It's a, it's him, but more at the
Yeah,
point of the siege. He's not a demon by any stretch.
no,
Full on rejects all of that, and it's a bit the same with the loyalists. Sanguinius in full fight mode might be a different. Full fight mode in the siege might be a rather different
Emperor
prospect to the
infused
version they've got now. You may be, yeah. It's not
potentially.
necessarily I've got more power. Dawn is not going to have more power necessarily, but him in a I'm going to go and take on the Alpha Legion, for example, him in a combat
Oh yeah,
phase. And
yeah, definitely in
I was
different.
thinking more about yes, so it's not literally an up-powered version. That's why it's a poor choice of words, but it's one that where they may be shown in a more in a version that's them but more. And that's why I was thinking maybe the Khan,
Yeah,
because an obvious thing to do is add the bike.
yeah. I mean, absolutely, the Khan's got to have the bike, right? Because they
Mm-hmm.
need that. They need that bike out there. But Ferris is
Mm-hmm.
in a full action pose.
Yeah.
Is he going to be bigger? Probably, because he's not. They can do that absolutely fine. But whether he has to be in an action pose or not, I don't know. But who knows? Who knows? Let's put a name on one. Who am I going to do? Um, and well, we know Sam had the idea that Dawn could be made in 2 poses, like a historic
Mm.
pose and then a fighting pose. So maybe he revisits something like Dawn or Guilliman, um, to
I would
do
have
that.
thought it would be one of the earlier ones, one of the ones that was released earlier, because there's
I
more
mean,
scope to do
yeah,
interesting things there.
I just
So I'm immediately thinking Angron.
yeah,
But
but
you've
they've
had
just done the.
two traitors on the trot now, so logically it
I
would be
mean,
a
although
bonus.
if you are then going to sell books with rules in, like it makes sense to do the ones that you can do new rules for. So to do Mortarion, to do Angron Ascended,
Mm.
does make some sort of sense as well. Who knows? We will look forward to finding out. Please, GW, give us a Primarch. That would be lovely. We always need another Primarch, and just to see what people do with them as well. Loads of cool stuff. Right, was there anything else? I haven't read any of the Black Library Xmas calendar short stories. Have you?
Goodness. Now, I think this says a lot.
Didn't
If
know
we
they were
go
there.
and speak to a friend of the show, Mike of Track of Words, he would have some choice words to say about this. It says a lot. I didn't know there was one,
I
and I think that says a lot for
did.
how Black Library. I mean, where is the marketing of these things?
It was put
How
out.
can I not know that there is one? That's crazy.
It was put out on Warcom, but I think it was only one thing. You got Anathema. You got loads of Age of Sigmar, 40k. There's not many. You've
Right.
got Peter Favari
Mm.
novel, which is interesting. There's not many on here, but you've got Anathema. I think it might be
Can't
the
even
only
find it when I
Horus
go to it.
Heresy one. If you just Google Black Library
I was going to say Black
2024
Library.
e short, it's on the Black Library website. You can find all the stories.
Okay,
It's
there we go. Right.
only one Heresy one.
Right, now what are we doing after this recording session then? I will
Yeah,
go and
I
grab
need to go
that.
and buy that and download it. Yeah, so I haven't done that, which I need to do. It's about Janisha Cross. I still need to catch up on a couple of books actually on Heresy that I haven't quite finished off. Some shorts as well from last year, I think. That's on my list of things to do. Joy Toy have released a load of Custodes and a Knight Paladin.
Yeah.
And I'm on the
Wow.
America website, and it's let's change that to English because it's $699, I think. So £557 for the Knight Paladin. I mean, fair play. But
It must be huge.
oh yeah, well they've got a dude stood next to it for scale. One of their dudes, because I think you get a dude, you get the pilot next to it who'll be just shorter
Oh,
than a
cool.
space
Okay.
marine, so it comes up to the top of his shin armor. Not quite. You've got Valdor for 102 quid.
Aldor
Right,
was the
that's
one I've
pretty
mentioned
cool.
it to a close friend of mine, and he's a custodian fan. That may be the model that pushes him over the edge into collecting Joy Toys.
Sure.
He
The
was
Aquilid
super
Terminators
excited
are
by that.
pretty nice as well, and the
Mm-hmm.
Venatari. Yeah, they got yeah.
Putting stuff out at a pace. I mean,
They are, aren't they?
whatever their workflow is to take what I presume are GW digital files and turn them into models that are
Yeah.
workable. Yeah, I'm quite impressed with how they're doing that. And as I
Sanguinius.
said before, really useful paint references.
Yeah. Sanguinius is £8 off at the moment.
Oh, don't
8% off. Over
don't
eight
need to know
pounds.
that.
With this little flying stand that he gets and all his different weapons. Yeah, I need to look at Russ. Don't need to look at Russ. I spent too much money. I
Yeah,
need
this
to
is the
sell
problem.
some stuff, and then I need to look at Russ and Haval Red Blade, and yeah. And weirdly, it might be one of the only places you could get like the Space Force Praetor. So you could put him on a 40 mil base and use him in the game.
Counts. Yeah.
That's cool. And I think they've just released a so Warhammer TV is changing. So if you don't have a subscription and don't want one, but they're putting more different content up there, and they've put up a Primarch's Royal Rumble for their battle report, which I haven't watched yet either. So that could be quite
Okay.
interesting.
Are you subscribed?
Yeah, I subscribe at the start. So when it changes new season, I'm fairly early in that new season, and then
Right.
I get the model as soon as possible. Then I put that model on eBay, and this year it was just under 50 quid. So I paid like £5 for my year's subscription. Previous years I paid
Okay.
nothing. One year I
Mhm.
paid £10 for my year's subscription. So, and
Mhm.
I use the 40k and the Age of Sigmar apps to build armies as well. So for me, it's like no brainer. Get the model,
Okay.
sell it to someone, pay all in 1 year to get the model early, sell it on eBay, get your money back, pay a
Mhm.
5 or 3 years worth of content.
Mm.
And there is some good
And the
content
apps,
on
yeah.
there. Like
Mm.
some of the
Particularly
TV
recently.
shows,
Mm.
yeah, have stepped up, and that's without, obviously we had the Space Marine secret level episode.
Mm.
Separate from that, but we're going to get more content on Warhammer Plus. Hopefully, some more Heresy content this year.
I'm quite liking that there's a little hint with some of the shows they've started to release that you're getting more in inverted commas behind the scenes. There's like
Yes.
author interviews, that sort of thing, which is only really stuff that they can do now.
Yeah, they've made it harder to
Yeah. Mm.
for other people to do that kind of stuff, and anyone who works at GW is pretty much impossible. And
Mm.
the one thing that I was talking to them about donkeys years ago, before they had Warhammer TV, I was like, dude, like get a podcaster, have, even if you do it as a marketing thing, talking about whatever's new, have the designer on that
Mhm.
week talking about what's new. 30 minutes, 40 minutes, doesn't matter. Like it would just be one of the big podcasts in that environment. And
Mhm.
there it looks like 7 or 8 years later they're finally getting around to it.
Mhm.
I offered them, I said I could be your official podcaster, but yeah, didn't take me up on it.
Well, because I thought their podcast with Wade, when he was doing it, when they
Yeah,
did
they did
those
that
early
for a
on,
bit,
they
and
were
they
very
really
effective.
nailed it. They really
Mm.
nailed it for a bit. And I don't know whether it's because of they needed someone like Wade, they didn't know how to do it, or whether they had one or two that weren't listened to as or didn't go down as well. But you always have one or two who don't go down as well. Um,
Mm.
you ride those
I
out,
imagine it was more that the people involved who were doing it were no longer available because they were doing other things, and
maybe.
that's the kind of it. It's wild speculation, but whatever. It doesn't around anymore. They
It's
have done
so
it well. They're not
stupid.
doing it anymore, which is a
I mean,
shame.
for something, yeah, for something like that, where it's just interview this person, it almost doesn't matter where that person works in the company. Like,
Mm.
oh no, Wade's moved to this department. Cool. Well, say, if we give you an extra little bit of money here, could you come and do this for us? Because if you have the ability to talk like Wade did, he's still involved in it. It doesn't take much research,
Mm.
because the people he's talking to, he knows how to get out of them what he wants out of them. So he could just be handed a model, and go, and start off like so. It's design process. You've got like these kind of these kind of swirls in their armor. And it's like, what does that represent? How did you come up with that? That can be, that's a good um, host will be able to do that no matter what.
Mhm.
And Wade was a good host. I know there were issues, and maybe it was just one of those things where it had to stop for a bit and then never came back. I don't know, but maybe just the TV time they thought they were going to do it and never did it. But hopefully
Mm.
they continue with it. Awesome. Right.
It'd be nice to see a version of it, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, big time. Okay, let's hit that and come back and look at our review of the year. Right, so here we are, 1 year later. I said we would log every release and talk about it, and I did really well for a few months, and then a few weeks ago went back and filled in about 5 months of the stuff as best as I could, because sometimes GW change their articles. So if there are some slight discrepancies at the end, you'll have to forgive me. Let's just go through them month by month, I think, and then like kind of look back at what we had going on. So January, we had some made to orders that were useful for Heresy. Severin Loth
Mm.
and Honor Guard, Lufthuron, the Landspeeder Tempest, the Regents of the Ordo Rift, which is the Red Scorpions Banner Dude and Champion, which are in older marks of armor and had people would buy them for various reasons, but they could be used. What else do we have? Titanicus dice releases, Solaria, Astorum, Volpa, and Metallica transfers. Any kind of transfer release is kind of a big deal because they don't come around very often,
Yeah.
and
When
they
they
don't
do, people do
last.
tend to go mad for it because people also
Yeah.
know how much these things can go for after the event. After when people are coming to them later. So that
Sure.
is actually quite a useful release.
Mm. And then End and the Death Volume 3. It was in January because it was just before. We all thought it was going to be Celebration. It wasn't. It was just
Mm,
before. Heard nothing since. Even though in the paperback version there is that other book
indeed.
that was rumored to be coming out, which might purely be collecting stories. We don't really know, do we? What it
Well,
is? Uh,
it
do
depends
we?
how
I don't
much
remember.
credibility one puts into this copy that was found in
Oh,
a
true. Yeah.
charity shop or whatever. I think it was a charity shop. It was found a copy of this thing in the same style as the limited edition Siege of Terror book. So it was
That's
another
right.
leather bound with a half decayed Imperial Eagle, half normal Heresy era Imperial Eagle on the front. I forget its name off the top of my head, but it was
Don't
an anthology of stories that we haven't seen before, I believe. And there was about 8 of them, I think, between 6 and 8 of them, all from authors who had done items in the siege. It appears to be genuine, and then the fact that it was then seen with the same title listed in the paperback version of
Hmm.
the End of the 3 seemed to confirm that this is going to be a thing. When? Who knows?
Yeah,
Some
it's
point
really
in
interesting.
2020? Oh.
It's been a year since we've had End of the Death, and that library's been pretty quiet. We've had some big releases, but they've been individual. Whether they're working on the next project and I don't feel they're ready to, like they want their ducks all in a row before they kind of announce anything, or
Mm.
whether they're just muddling along in certain, like, trying to get authors involved or what have you. I mean, well, no one knows. But this book that seems to be part of a series that hasn't had a book release for, which seems to be over, because we haven't been told anything else, seems extremely strange. And I wanted to do a big thing in February about End and Death, but as I say, there are certain authors that are hard to get hold of now, certainly
Mm.
harder than they used to be, and certain that works with GW that I would want involved if I can do it, but maybe that's something I need to push on with. Yeah, interesting. But yeah, as a start to the year go, nothing too exciting except for End and Death. Cool. January can be quiet. February saw a new wave of Legions Imperialis stuff with the Great Slaughter, the Solar Auxilius and Legions Astartes support, Malcador Infernus and Valdor tanks, Spartan Assault tank, and obviously armor cards for Great Slaughter as well. Army cards, should I say? Which was, the problem is if you're not into Legions Imperialis. Oh, we got the Siegebreaker console, didn't we?
Mm-hmm.
So
That release did kick that game up a notch considerably. Actually,
yes,
it was
yeah. I
it
mean, it
was quite an
was
important release for Legions Imperius, and it
sure.
was relatively hot on the heels of the release after the release was
Yeah.
delayed. So quite exciting. But if you're not into Legions, yeah, it's one character.
Which is interesting. I'm trying to remember what it looks like. It's been when you look back at some of this stuff and you're like,
He's got one of those
what was it?
Heresy era iPads and a big hammer.
Of course, yes, yes, I know the one. Absolutely. And we also got the Art of the Horus Heresy book from Black Library as well,
That
which
was
is
pretty
nice
popular.
again.
Mm.
Yeah, it was. It will be. Those art books tend to be
Mm.
pretty popular. But it was so 2 months, a good kick for Legion Imperialis, but overall a relatively slow start. But then we did get March. So Age of Darkness wise, we got the Solar Auxilia Battle Group, pretty big release. Stormseer Console, Dark Emissary, Solar Auxilia dice, Battle for Beta Garmin, the Velataris, the Solar Auxilia Tactical Command Section, Las Rifle, Malkador, Lehman Russ, Strike Tank, Lehman Russ Assault Tank, Dracosan, Athean Heavy Sentinel, Vehicle Martin's Transfer Sheet, Black Shield's Transfer Sheet, Endrid Har, the Riven Hound, and Legions Astartes Infantry and Vehicle Transfer Sheets as well. That's a decent chunk of stuff in a month.
There's 8 Solar Auxilia, Age of Darkness Solar Auxilia kits released there, excluding the battle group, which obviously was a limited run thing, the dice and the transfers. You exclude all of that. There's model kits that are going to be permanent in the range. 8 kits came out there, and we've obviously had previewed a while ago now. What was it in the preview? I think earlier last month. They had 3 more. We got the Arvis Lighter and the 2 other Malkador variants coming up. So there's a lot of kit. It was they dumped most of the range of Solar Auxilia out in that 1 month. That was pretty impressive.
The problem being it's Solar Auxilia, and therefore it's a smaller percentage of the playing kind of space. Though it did see, a load of Solar Auxilia get kind of taken up, which is cool. But it's weird how. Maybe I'll say that for the end. But a good chunk of AOD, even if it was specifically those aspects of it. And then alongside that, we got some more Imperialis and Medusa and Basilisk batteries, Land Raider Proteus, drop pods, Solar Auxilia, the Arvis Lighter, and then we got the re-release of the Warhound Titans with the Ursus Claw and Melter Lances added, and the Direwolf in plastic as well. So a bit for AT as well, for whatever that's worth. But another solid chunk of Legions to help that.
Direwolf was quite a big deal to be releasing that in plastic.
Yeah, so soon after it was,
because that was also a pain of a kit to build in resin only.
Never did build it. Sold them.
Yeah, I still have them in a cupboard. Delightful. It's a nice kit to now have in plastic, I think. So that was quite a good sign where they were going to hopefully take things with Legions. But yeah, in terms of also potentially setting a template, as much as what anything can be a template, for how new factions were going to be looked at in Age of Darkness, it boded very well seeing Solar Auxilia get that level of treatment.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. Moving on to April, the Hermes Light Sentinels, the Basilisk and Medusa for AOD, the Armory of the Blood Angels. And I've written here Bal Predator Upgrade Pack. Was that right?
That's right.
Was,
sounds wrong. I looked at that. No, I almost looked at that the other day. Looked at it again recently for considering a couple of things, and those were the first weapons packs that were released, and they did do them as 2 separate kits. One was to upgrade the Predator. Bal Predator is not really a thing, but it's not in Heresy. I'm not sure it is in 40k anymore either. But it's essentially a Predator, but because Blood Angels and Imperial Fists can upgrade heavy flamers to assault cannons, you can put assault cannons all over your Predators, and that's the term here as a Bal Predator.
I mean, it's a name people know, so it's cool. But a nice little cool, something for your Blood Angels players, something a bit more, again adding to that weight of Solar Auxilia releases, which is really good to help push them on again. May then saw pumping the Legions Imperialis with Stormhammers, Malkadors, Dracosans, Sakarans, Legion Fast Attack Box, and Dreadnought Drop Pods. Again, a good chunk of, and this is where you start to see some of the bigger, like the Stormhammers. I think, is it next time? Oh, we might have to wait a couple more months before. I think it's August where it really becomes like the bigger stuff starts to come, which can change the game a little bit. Because at this point, a lot of people were still like, "Oh, if you just put troops in cover, and it's so hard to get them out, and blah blah blah." This is still very much get the armies out, get it all working. But a solid release for Legions, nothing for Age of Darkness. But that's kind of resolved in June with our first real like Legions release, Legions release, with Plastic Shield Captain, which is, you know, 40k, but whatever. Mark 3 Command Squad, Mark 6 Command Squad, Legion Command Upgrade Set, and then Hibu-Khan, Little Horus Axeman, Shadrach, Meduson, and Tybalt Mar. That's pretty good.
Tybalt Mar, in particular, with
Yeah.
being one I've now seen as I think most people predicted, he's as a base for a Praetor of a bunch of legions. he's the new Pollux, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you really doing it without? Are you really doing Heresy unless you've done a conversion of Tybalt Mar at some point? Great to have a model that's that useful and generally appealing, and as you say, really significant that we see some plastic legions releases.
Yeah. So, you might have been waiting, Siegebreaker console, not everyone's taking them. You might have been waiting till June to get your first real releases for your army for Age of Darkness. We also get the Legions of Astartes battle group, the Predator Squad, the Solar Auxilia battle group, and the Lehman Rush Strike Squadron for Legions Imperialis. So again, just keeping up that pace for Legions to get it to a point where you can really play it. We have a break for
Interesting that
July.
the battle groups are still available. Interestingly, the Legions
Well,
of
I think
Astartes and the Solar Auxilia, and
I
obviously the
don't think
Mechanicum one has joined it recently.
you need the battle groups to get people to enough points to play the game. This is not it. Yeah, it's not like Heresy to a point where it's like, here's a way of getting this army sorted. It's like with Legions, I think it's like, if you don't have a battle group to be able to buy a lot of tanks very quickly, then you can never get to a small points game, let alone a big points game. I think it's
I
fundamentally
thought they
more
were going to
important.
be a splash
One
release,
and
and they've
done.
actually ended up being one
No, I think
it's been hanging around for a while, and they are pretty good value
yes,
from the
for
third
sure.
parties, particularly. You go from the third party friendly local gaming stores, and those are quite good value.
Sort of becomes one of your ways in, which is useful. July sees a whole host of nothing because July is Age of Sigmar release. Not unusual at all, but we're looking at a period of time where I just remember there being some grumbling, but it is what it is. We did get the Mechanicum Battle Group and the Night Battle Group in Age of Darkness in August, and then Devastation of Talon for Legions Imperialis, and this is where you got Shadow Sword, Stormblade, Storm Swords, Lehman Rush, Demolisher, Executioner, Sikaran, Arcus, and Punisher, Saber Type, Strike, Tank, Squadron, Termite Soldiers, Lehman Rush, Exterminator, and Annihilator, all released. And this is where you saw a step up of, getting those Shadow Swords out really ups the level of destruction. Termite Assault Drills help with that as well, in a different way, but a good, strong release for Legions Imperialis around that.
Including what I think was a very strong book in
Yes.
Devastation of Talon.
Yeah.
Very good
And
to
it'll be
know
interesting
more
to
about
see the
that.
follow up. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Whenever that might be. Pushing into September, Martian Civil War for Age of Darkness. So we've got the Archmage's Prime, Thalax Cohort, Castlax Battle Automata, Thanatar Cava Siege Automata, Tacticals Covenant, Triaris Armored Conveyor. Again, pushing out a new army with a decent chunk of stuff. And we know now that we're getting more for this in January, which, bearing in mind November and December, November ends up being a lot of Christmas stuff, December being a bit of Christmas stuff / 2 weeks of no ordering. It's not too bad. So this year we've had Solar Auxilia, 2 whole armies like being pushed out in plastic. It's not a small thing to do, and I think they've done it pretty well with those 2 armies.
The Martian Civil War book, divided opinion, I think it's fair to say.
Yes, yeah. I
Or
don't.
perhaps a better way of saying it said it was a mixture of, pretty cool, okay, through to outright hostility towards it. I think I fell in more the former camp because I quite enjoyed the lore in it and the fact, but in terms of it overhauling or Not that it needed to necessarily, but it didn't fundamentally. It didn't add a great deal
It
to the
no,
Mechanicum action, and it didn't add Dark Mechanicum really. It
no.
had a flavour, had a little hint of it, but it wasn't something completely standalone, if you like. It wasn't a milestone release in that respect, and I think some people were expecting it to be, because some people's opinion of the Martian Civil War was it was so huge, which I suppose in some ways it is. But there's a lot more of the Mechanicum range to come, as you say, in theory, assuming they do, assuming
It
it's sold well enough to
had
do
a
so.
decent amount of Space Marine stuff in there, which
Yes, yes, yes.
you understand is a disappointment for people who want to buy the Martian Civil War book.
Mm.
You know, the title maybe misleads what's in it a little
Mm.
bit, whilst also
Mm-hmm.
being absolutely the Martian Civil War is fine. Um, but maybe if they'd been ahead of that, it would have helped resolve that a little bit. Um, but yeah, say sets up Mechanicum well, I think. But October sees us return to the Rise of the Dark Mechanicum, hot on the heels of the Martian Civil War. So here we do see aspects of the Dark Mechanicum. So we get the new models, the new stalkers and things like that, and a
Well,
slight.
we do, and we don't. They don't get the models in
No, we get
hand,
the
but we
rule.
do get them shown. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Um, but we get a view of what the Dark Mechanicum might bring.
Mm. Absolutely.
We get the Mechanicum Battle Group, the Night House Battle Group, the Titan Battle Group, Mechanicum cards, and Manufactorum Imperialis sector. So all good for Legions, and of course, a good one for AT players as well in there.
Mm-hmm.
Again, just pushing Legions. Interestingly, this takes it further than Age of Darkness have taken models and stuff. So for the first time, we're seeing Legions running ahead into a different region, which is good for the game, I think.
I
That it's
wouldn't
not.
mind betting. I'd like to think, given the types of references, and even having had conversations at open days and weekenders and seminars and things in the past, that the people who are working on this, people like your Andy Halls and similar, they're part of that team. Epic was always very good at being the thing, partly because the technology meant that large scale kits or otherwise couldn't really exist in
Yeah.
28mm as it was then scale. So a lot of the bigger things, pretty much everything super heavy, thereabouts, and bigger certainly, was all the realm of Epic. And so there was an awful lot that was developed in Epic, just even from sort of medium tank size, that didn't exist and has now
Mm.
latterly been brought into Age of Darkness and
Oh,
all 40k or both.
Knights. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Remember when the
Spot on. Good
Baneblade came
example.
out? Like, whoa,
Yeah,
stompers. Um,
yeah.
yeah.
So you got all these things that were in Epic first.
Yeah.
Epic designed them, and that includes some really big things, Titans included. I kind of hope that those people who have got nostalgia for that era are going to try and use Epic in that way again. And I sort of feel like that's happened here, where they just felt, right, we can do these cool big things, which we can't necessarily do yet, or possibly ever,
Whatever.
in
Yeah.
Age of Darkness,
But I mean,
or 28mm, whatever.
you kind of have to, because although the game is different, it has to stand on its own 2 feet a little bit,
Mm, mm,
and it does that by having different things. If it's just 40k in smaller scale, it's cool. But if it's like, oh, this is where I can do X, Y, and Z,
yeah,
then it
yeah.
becomes that much more. It becomes, a standalone game in its own right to a much greater extent. And Andy Hoare heads up specialist and all that, and I'm pretty sure the guys who are, the guys who write all this stuff, I think if they haven't got in on the reviving the old stuff by now, then how are they still there? Because you would be, because you can see it through a lot through Necromunda, but you can also see it a lot
Mm,
in Heresy, the callbacks to older stuff.
mhm.
And I think if that wasn't your bag, it would be hard to keep going on that. Maybe not. Maybe there are people there who are like, yeah, cool, do as I'm told. Fair play to you if you are. But yeah, I think there's potential for that to keep chugging away.
Yeah, we'd love
Yes.
to see that.
Yeah, a really interesting release actually. Like the book. Like what they're like putting out for that helps AT as well. November, melee weapons upgrade set. It finally arrived.
Huge, huge set.
Blast blast markers and templates was sort of a small one, which is crazily big because if you want people to be able to use toys, they've got to be able to have the things that go with them to allow them to, and to make them readily available for the bigger apocalyptic style blasts and things like that. And the Firestorm template becomes an important thing, even if it's not glamorous. And then we did have an Imperial Knights Battle Force box, mainly for 40k, but hey, we can use it. It's all good. So yeah, and as I say, at this point you're dealing with all the pre-Christmas kind of releases as well, which kind of made December nice in that we did get the Cerberus Overlord Heavy Stalkers, the Stalker constructs, the Thanatar Siege Automata cohort, and the Civitas Imperialis Elevated Plaza.
That was a bit of a surprise release. It sort of came out of nowhere and
Yes.
went, oh yeah, we got this. I've seen a few of them painted up and they look cool. I'd love it if they sort of took that principle and ran with it and did some pieces that meant you could have quite large elevated sections of the board rather than just contained within a 12-inch square. Do like a corner and make it like a something where you could build up a hill. But whatever. Cool to see them exploring what those tiles can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And then again, a nice little it's we've got getting those releases out just adds into what Legion Imperialis has done from October. Um, and takes us up to the end of the year when, as I say, we know we're getting a few more bits coming in at the start of 2025, and we'll do this again in 2025. And we've kind of rushed through this a little bit, and maybe it's not been the best way of doing it. But as we look back, Legion Imperialis has really been the winner this year, which it had to be.
Interesting.
Let's be honest. When you look at quantity of stuff and regularity, so February, March, May, June, August, October, December, all had Legions Imperialis stuff in there. And we're talking, 3-4 boxes a lot of those times. If plus book and whatever it needed. Quite a rate. I think it's needed, but I think it's a good thing to see them do. Because Legions, I kind of don't know where we are at the moment. I haven't really looked into kind of seeing what people are doing with Legions over the last couple of months.
The various. I mean, I'm part of a few groups, and you see
Yeah,
people exploring it, and people getting quite. There's interesting. There's quite a few people you wouldn't necessarily expect, who people perhaps aren't in those groups. People who are playing Age of Darkness, who are picking up the odd box.
yeah,
And that's. I wonder if you'll see slow armies being built that way or having a go that way. And then there are those who are being introduced into the game. So there's people who've been playing it for a while and have been enjoying it. There are groups and people who are saying, I'd like to see the game tweaked slightly. There's usually a few people, there's usually quite a few conversations, they rise every month or so, where people say, I'd like to overhaul this game and change the movements for a section and do this. And they start going down a bit of a route. And then
right, yeah,
usually the conclusion of that conversation with a few other people chiming, it's not people coming in and going, that's outrageous. They say, yeah, true, but then that's a different game. Actually, I'd want to keep it as minimal changes, effectively just an FAQ, just to add clarity over what was intended with a particular mechanism or otherwise. Just tighten it up effectively, and let's go with that. So, and then it usually convinces the people who are thinking of doing an overhaul, go, oh, actually, I'm not really interested in writing a complete new war game. They sort of pull back from it. That comes up every now and again. So it suggests that, and then as people play it, they go, this is pretty cool. But the key is playing it at smaller points values. It's at bigger points values that game gets heavy. So I think, and as you say, it's quite a
But has that?
modelling task to do all of that with that.
Well, I think
those kits.
that's a major part of it. And I know at our club it's stalled because people haven't painted their stuff, therefore they're not on bases, therefore they can't play. I wonder if the I wonder how the conversation's changed with the bigger weapons becoming more available, and do we need more of that? Because early on, particularly, there was, if you play a big game, it takes hours and blah blah blah. It's like, well, it will do if your 40 bases of assault marines are charging into, 40 bases of their tactical marines and then their terminators. But you put down some, um, Malcadors, or Stormhammers and above. Start to get the big weapons in Titan. Not necessarily Titans, they've been around, but your Storm Swords and Shadow Swords, like that, really hurt bigger stuff, hurt buildings. How that changes things. That doesn't change the scenarios, which I know is an issue in certain groups. How the scenarios, how the point scoring works. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see going into 2025 how that adapts. Because the game's
Yes,
there.
I've
The
also
game's
seen.
not bad.
I've seen people really enjoying it at smaller points levels, and/or limiting themselves to armor, which at Talon rather conveniently
Right.
added a narrative version to that.
Yep.
Limiting it to armor, air, and to a certain degree, sort of Titans and Knights and that sort of thing, but
Sure.
sort of smaller amounts of that. That infantry adds a whole other dimension to the game, and it's one that you sort of almost want to add later. I've seen people having a lot of fun with it as smallest points valued games on as big a board as possible with small points valued or armor. And I've played a few games like that, and I really enjoyed it. It got really tactical and plenty of terrain. There's plenty as well. Plenty
I
of
think
line of
that's been
sight
an
blocking
issue.
terrain.
Yeah.
I say plenty. Buildings everywhere.
Enough. Yeah. The
A
right
lot.
kind of terrain as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, my issue with 80 and Age of Darkness, actually. There was another conversation on another forum, and it was a 40k forum where some people play Age of Darkness. And I maintain that most tables I see don't have enough terrain on them, line of sight blocking terrain particularly, because there was some big complaints again about heavy support squads or whatever. And it's like, well, if you can just dump something and it can see 90% of the board, then I think the issue is the terrain. Nothing should be able to see 90% of the board. If there should be paths to get closer to help out, that kind of stuff. And it's a balance to be had. I say it'll be interesting to see. I feel Legions. I feel a little bit the same way as I do with Age of Darkness. Actually, I think a revised book and AT, but it's interesting that Legions has come out, and I feel it so strongly, so early, and maybe with Age of Darkness a bit as well. That I can see some areas that I would like the game improved. Don't necessarily know exactly how, like, but I can see some things which I stick on a little bit, and it feels like scenarios with Legions is one of those major points because that feeds into the problems that are occurring with larger point scale games.
Yeah.
And there might be other ways of doing it.
There was certain discussion over the number of activations because you're activating by detachment, trying to keep track of what detachment is in what formation, and that affects morale, and just pure numbers of activations. If you've got 30, 40 activations each, that's a thing. But that's
units
3,000
and different.
points or more. Yeah.
Yeah, and ultimately, I mean, it's not a tournament game. I can see people playing it as a tournament game. I don't think it's made that way. Don't think any of the games from Specialist are really made that way. Ironically, AT being one of the better games for it. I think there are ways and means to manage that whether players go about that is a different factor. And within a set gamer group, it's easier, as you say, to agree to like, okay, cool, we're mainly going to take this and we're mainly going to do that. And then maybe the game shines. But with this is one of the reasons why 40k might not necessarily be a good thing ever going to activations, and I'm not sure it will anyway, but activation games can all get wonky once activations become imbalanced. And it becomes a resource that can be so extra on top of what you're already trying to manage. But yeah, who knows? So yeah, legions. That's interesting. Now, Age of Darkness. If you're a solo auxiliary player, I think you've had a pretty good year. If you're a mechanical player, you've had a not bad year and getting better. If you're your average Salamanders player, you got a couple of bits through the year, and this is the problem I've seen online a little bit of. Not been anything for Age of Darkness recently. It's like, well, there has, not necessarily for you, and part of this is the nature of having, and this is what made the game hard, right? Having 18 different legions plus other armies to choose from. Plus, now we're trying to get everything in plastic. So when Age of Darkness sometimes does release stuff, oh, cool, awesome, we got the
It's a
things
thing
I've
we've
already
seen
got,
before. Yeah.
but now in plastic, and I've already owned two of them in resin, and it's like, well, yeah, you do, but your mate doesn't, who's just trying to get into the game, and this means he can get into the game, or she. So I don't think it's been a bad year for Age of Darkness, but January and February were not a lot. March was boom, here's your solo auxiliary. April had a little bit more. Then we wait till June, cool, Mark 3 Command Squad, Mark 6 Command Squad, good solid month. Then there's a break, Mechanicum Battle Group, some Mechanicum stuff, September with a book that, it's amazing how a book that is taken by the community as being lackluster can affect their view of the whole releases. I think that plays an effect. So you got the Mechanicum, which I've seen a lot of people buying bits and pieces of, and then you finally get your melee weapons upgrade set, which is great, but it's very bitty, and I don't think that's going to change going forwards. That's the nature of, compared to 5 years ago when we used to get Heresy releases. This is amazing. Someone who is part of Forge World was saying that I think the plastic Heresy release, in terms of business, is bigger than specialty design studios used to be back when the Heresy was in its like first edition going guns. Like, so bigger than when they were doing Blood Bowl and Heresy and Aeronautica and 80. Like, Plastic Heresy is doing big things for the game it is, and that means you're getting plastic Solar Auxilia, means you're getting plastic Mechanicum, and more coming forwards. But it can feel weird when, as you say, you're getting boom, here's loads of Solar Auxilia, and a couple of like Endritar, like how many people are going to pick him up? Yeah, okay, well, it's still a cool release. Like, it's not a cool release, is it? And then a little bit here, a little bit here, and of course July's empty, and then August is not that much. And I think if that came at the end of August, I think it probably was earlier. But you could look at that and say, oh, I haven't had anything for the whole of July and August. Oh, September comes, we finally get something. Last thing we got was in June. It's like, well, it's peaks and troughs with this, and it always will be. You look at Blood Bowl is kind of set now on a 2 or 3 release, like a couple of teams a year with the odd star players poked through and maybe a splash release of something in the middle. They're trying to time their releases to keep interest, but also not push everything out in 3 years and have nothing left to sell. Like, other games have done this. Guild Ball struggled, X-Wing struggled. X-Wing was running out of ships to make
Yes.
after a good long time, to be fair, but they're running out of stuff to do. Blood Bowl's getting to the point where they'll have redone all the teams. Do they go back and redo like the first teams from the redos, like the Orcs or something like
Mm.
that? It's a tough call to make, I think, to see if people want to buy that. So when you look at them and say you look at Necromunda gets lots of releases. There's lots of splash releases though. It's lots of one dude here and one dude there and two dude, and they're fantastic models. But are they necessarily the models you want? Again, but because it's drip fed, it seems like Necromunda's always getting a release. You know what I mean? You don't
I
get
do.
10
I do.
Necromunda releases in 1 month like you do with
No.
Age of Darkness. But
Age
it
of Darkness is,
feels
as you say,
better.
much more. It really does peak,
Yeah.
almost because it's so. And maybe Necromunda will end up being that, where it ends up being very fractured, or there's a large number of factions to play. The Necromunda does itself rather well, though, in that the releases it has can apply to most of the
It has
games.
this amazing
Yeah,
wealth of resources that are agnostic to
spot on.
your
Factions.
what faction you're playing. So
Yeah,
cool, Lady Helmer, like yeah, cool. She's this girl, and but she's also a cool model as well. It's a painter's one, and it's like, oh cool, here's a scummer, or whatever you've
yeah.
got, or here's a
Well,
water thing.
here's
Okay,
a
cool.
here's a
Basically, anyone can
random
use
bounty thing. Here's a random
everyone
aspect of
can use. Yeah,
imperial culture you've never seen before,
yeah. Oh,
but
here's a month
anyone can
where
use it.
Yeah, and here's a month where Orlocks are getting stuff. Okay, cool. That's still helping our
Mm-hmm.
game, but it's not for me. Fine, because next month I'm going to get some ratty things. They're just going to run
Yeah.
around and do whatever. So
Mm.
it's easier in inverted commas to maintain a steady release. And you know when when you get to anything when you're releasing podcasts like Apple back in the day, they were like, right, cool. Essentially to get traction, to get pushed up things, you need to be releasing regularly in a pattern, because people come back to you knowing there's something going to be there. When you release a scattergun, you lose people because, oh, I didn't know that they'd release that. It's like, well, yeah,
Mm.
because I check Warhammer Warcom each day. Does the average Legion Imperialis player do it? If they're not into other games, maybe not. Blood Bowl, certainly, where they're like, oh, has Games Workshop released something? Because there's a community there that don't like Games Workshop as well. But they don't need to check every week. They wait for someone to tell them that Games Workshop have put up a post. Um,
Mm.
whereas Age of Darkness, we are looking most weeks because we do get something most months, and every now and then we get a big release. Um, say for quantity of stuff we've got this year, it's not bad. I don't think.
I would agree with that. Particularly, that's why the value of writing all this out like this, because you can look back
Yeah,
over it. I mean, there's a lot of AOD written on here. The challenge, of course, is that it then becomes compared with the previous year, 2023, where you were getting a lot of that stuff, a lot of the
yeah.
Legion stuff being converted to plastic. So you were getting fairly regular. And I bet if we look back over it and did that comparison, it would be a pretty
Not.
regular rollout of vehicles, a regular
Yeah,
rollout of consoles, as they started to release those. And there's still some of those coming now. Maybe they've held some of those back, whatever. We're now starting to see some Legion specific things come out. Unfortunately, you can look at those and think, I can convert those, like exactly as you said. Iron Warriors Warsmith comes out, think, great, that's a Forge Lord for all of the other 17 legions, potentially. The tricky bit this year, of course, is that you don't have that monthly release or whatever or it's in some cases weekly, of even just a single model. You actually they're grouping them together, and then on top of that, you've got the extra peak of releasing two factions, albeit Mechanicum hasn't had anything like the number of kits released that Solar have yet, potentially. Um, that's two massive factions for the game to be released in plastic,
it
and has
is.
opened them up and made them viable. I would argue for the vast majority of people playing the game, Solar wasn't really a practical option, just purely based on sort of hobbying difficulty and, frankly, cost to do for the amount you would need, to then end up with something that was quite difficult to play, compared, at a point where it was somehow even-sided.
Challenging.
Yes, challenging to become something where it was an actual game rather than a slaughter. That's perhaps secondary, but anyway, both of them open up. And you think,
It's not because that affects people's buying patterns. Am I going to buy a solo auxiliary army when I know that I'm going to be up against it every game? Some people mindset, fine, cool, I'll take that challenge on. A lot of people, well, I don't want to lose like 80% of my games, like just because I've taken solo auxiliary. If that's true or not, that's the perception. So
I want to have a miserable time here.
Mechanicum, that perception shifted a bit. And all of a sudden, there's a lot more talk. Oh, Mechanicum aren't as bad as we were made to believe they are. Maybe it's worth picking up some stuff. That does have an effect. Narrative gaming or otherwise, you don't want to put models on the table that are going to achieve nothing. I mean, like properly nothing. I think in previous, like it'll be really interesting next year if we get a book that isn't releasing a new faction to see if we get a new vehicle, a new something. And I think that's the one thing this year that we haven't had, where it's like, where's the new thing? We've got, okay, cool. We've got the weapon sets. Well, it's replacing resin weapon sets. We've got the command sets. Again, they're replacing command sets. Got some new characters. Cool. We're always going to get new characters. That's cool. That's fine. We got 2 big releases of stuff we already know about. Except for like the odd thing like the heavy sentinel. So there's been nothing new this year that really makes it stand out. Chuck a Primarch in next year, and all of a sudden there's a talking point. Now, obviously, there's lots of rumours about we could see a new starter set and a revised rule book and what have you this year. And if we do, then that changes everything.
Yes, it does.
If they do that, I'd still want to see something new, like actually new. I don't know how easy that is for them to do, but cool. I'm sure there's better brains than I.
It's an interesting thing to then think of in those terms, because particularly looking back over a set of releases like this, and it's become to a degree, and this won't necessarily be the same moving forward, but it's become somewhat predictable with 40k and Age of Sigmar when a new edition is on the way, where the way they release, the way they sort of wind down an edition. Okay,
yes.
all the codex / army books have all been released. Now they're doing a series of narrative books, which takes you into the narrative, winds down this edition with a few fun variations on whatever the current version is.
Or winds it up.
Winds down the narrative, and winds down one, winds up the narrative for a new edition. Yeah. Cool. Age of Darkness doesn't have that cycle. It can't. It doesn't yet. Maybe it never will.
It can't because it's not new stories. It's not an ongoing
good point.
Narrative.
No, but it could be following a narrative. But yeah, regardless, you say it can't follow that same principle. You look at this and you think, oh, there's a winding down of the Legion's releases. Yeah, but as we just said, 2 significant factions, hugely significant factions in the setting, have released with, in some cases, dozens of kits being released. Now, so there's no, you look at that and you think, well, that's not in preparation for a new edition of a game. Depends what you mean by a new edition of a game. If it's a tightening up of a rule set, absolutely fine. Same with certain campaign books being released. I don't think there's anything here to specifically say that there is or isn't a new edition coming.
But would there ever be? Because the heresy setting is set. Like, can we add stuff to it? Yes, we can. Obviously, there's always something that can be done. But the story is set. We've had 58 books that have told a story, and we've had all these other books that have got. So we know, like, the majority of the story that's being told. So if they came in and completely changed every rule and released a new edition that was unrecognizable, it would still use everything we've got. So there is nothing to ever really tell us that something new is coming, unless it's a teaser to tell us something new is coming, or rumors or whatever. I don't think there's any model releases that could ever really unless they started putting like movement trays with your things, 5 dudes per thing. Unless it was something like that, there's never going to be a kind of, we can see something's happening. The only thing we get is, like they've taken all of the Mechanicum are suddenly, like, apparently now if you go on, loads of Eldar kits are missing from Warcom. So there's a lot of chat about, okay, cool, we're getting the Eldar release, it's going to push out. Brilliant, cool. Maybe that's true, maybe that's not. But there's something to hang your hat on.
I think
And I don't
I think
think
there's a
Heresy
few
will ever have that.
things. Not in the same way. Whereas, as I say, 40k and Age of Sigmar have become emotionally predictable in that respect. I agree, not in the same
They're
way,
also on a
but they did.
sorry. They're also on a set 3-year timeline that they've been on for a number of years, and Heresy isn't. Now,
When you
is
say
Heresy
set, it's
going
not
to?
actually set anymore.
Well, they've been on a regular. Age of Sigmar has been on a 3-year cycle since it was
Yes, and
40k's been on a
people
3-year
have
cycle
deduced it.
since that
Yeah.
point, and it hasn't shifted, and it appears to be like all the evidence suggests that that is a 3-year cycle that they're going to carry on with, and they could change it. Marketing could just say, "Cool, we're changing this, we're moving it to 4 years, whatever." But it seems to be what I mean. Their financials
Agreed.
tell you as well. FTSE 100, like we
Yeah.
didn't even talk
Why
about
would
that
you
in the
change
news.
it?
Like, why would you change it? Heresy is a different beast from that. It's not a competitive game, and aspects of the 3-year cycle is required because a competitive game bloats over a 3-year period with army releases. Heresy's armies are out. They might adapt and progress, but you don't. When you release a Salamanders thing, you don't re-release the Salamanders book yet, unless they go that way. I don't think they will necessarily go fully that way. I
No.
could see them. I wouldn't put it past them to have a Space Wolves book that adds on to, but your main army is still the Legion's army with here's your feel for it. So it doesn't have the same mechanics. Now, does that mean we don't go to a 3? No. Who knows, right? But it doesn't mean that it's easy to go, yep, 3-year cycle, that's what GW do. Blood Bowl's 4 years old. Necromunders had a weird timeline on cycles as and when required.
And it's
Another game
still
system.
probably the hardest game they have to actually get into, particularly for a person new
Exactly.
to miniatures gaming. So, yeah, I agree completely.
Yeah, so,
Yeah, and I think the nature of what an
Lord of the Rings.
edition is fundamentally different for
Yeah.
Heresy. I was thinking also that obviously it's hard to draw a parallel when we had this edition of the game and the build up to that, because there was a complete. I mean, you and I were talking at the time. People say, "Oh, Heresy's dead," all that sort of stuff. And well, it isn't, and whatever else. And it had a lull before you suddenly kick off. There, we had that weird situation that, well, a leak took place that leaked the
Not just
fact
the league.
that
There were
something
clues.
significant was coming.
There were
Oh, there was a
clues as
load of
well
other stuff. There was
elsewhere. There was a
brilliant stuff
lot
with
of
it.
stuff
Yeah,
in.
serial numbers and stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah, there
it's a
was a lot
very
of stuff
different
coming.
period.
Yeah, exactly. So that you can't draw a parallel between
No.
that. But certainly looking at this, you couldn't look at this year and say, well, there's been. I mean, someone, as you say, might say, well, I'm a Legions player and I've had very little over this year, certainly compared to 2023. I've had a lot less. But you couldn't look at this year in any way and say, well, there's been having a massive reduction in the Age of Darkness releases, with a view to there being a new edition. Well, not at all, because there's actually been a huge amount of stuff. But as you say, that doesn't suggest that there isn't a new edition coming, because all that stuff remains the same. All the
The
models
framework
remain
is
the same.
framework is
Agreed.
so different. What I mean, there are people talking who I don't necessarily have reason to distrust. Timescales can be warped. People can be saying different things. There can be lots of reasons for lots of different things. Essentially, I think you're waiting till Wednesday night, Adepticon, March 22nd or whenever it is. If you don't get your trailer then, I don't think you're getting a new edition, like, or whatever. So I think that's your date. And there might be someone listening to this. There certainly are people on certain discords who I know would reply with, "No, it's coming, mate." It's like, cool, groovy. No one's told me it's coming. You know, I and therefore I'm not saying it's not coming, but I think, as I said, I've said in the past, I think the game could do with it. Does this then mean we are sat on a 3-year cycle? Also, not necessarily, because I think it was clear. I think there are certain things in the game which have become talking points to the point where various game groups have changed how they play stuff. And when you release a brand new system, I mean, look at Legions of Imperialis. We're already talking about there are gaming groups who change the way they play that game. So a hot on the heels revision of an edition is not necessarily a bad thing, and doesn't necessarily mean that you have to keep doing it regularly afterwards, because hopefully you've made the changes that allow that game a longer lifespan moving forwards.
I think it's your point, circling back to your point earlier of hoping to see a new thing, a new
Yeah,
vehicle, a new unit type. I agree with that completely. A new addition sort of inevitably invigorates something.
yeah, absolutely.
The idea of new units with a new addition as well, or whether new units in whatever form, as you say, we've heard, a lot of people listening to this will have heard rumours and similar of a new sort of launch box type thing with new Terminators potentially, or new Dreadnoughts. Those are the sort of rumours you hear repeated. Whatever. A new unit, that to me, you've really hit it there, I think, because that to me was at the point where Heresy was one of its most exciting, is you go to an open day or a weekend or whatever, and things being previewed were things you just simply haven't seen before in any way, shape, or form. Potentially a whole new chassis type of a vehicle, Sakaran being one of those. Sikaran, rather, I discovered it's pronounced. Let alone the variants thereof,
Thickering sounds
Arcus,
awful.
Punisher, others. I know that's not apparently that whatever. We won't go down that road. Something new comes along. Arguably, it was true with the Kratos as well. The Kratos coming out with this edition,
Yeah,
some new things. Like imagine a new type of Terminator coming out.
that's not
It's going
saturnine.
to excite everyone. Yeah,
Yeah,
oh yeah, something that comes out that is a new type of thing that everyone can use
yeah, absolutely.
across this verse would add a momentum to it. I
But
think that would be very
again,
exciting.
managing expectation, we only have 2 embiggened power armors. Like Mark IV's
Mm,
got to be coming soon, right? You would think.
mm,
Why would it not? Breaches in plastic. What else we got? Like enlarging the Terminators we have to fit. Like, all that kind of stuff still kind of has to happen and will be cool to see.
mm,
Because actually, when you look at it back over this year, let's have a little look. We had the Mark III Command Squad, Mark 6 Command Squad, Upgrade Squad. There's not been much of the old stuff being turned to plastic melee weapon set.
mm,
Like, so we haven't actually had that much this year of that, which we had all last year. Obviously, there's a roadmap that came out that said tanks, tanks, tanks. So hopefully we get more tanks being bought into plastic. Hopefully we get maybe some of the bigger tanks being bought into plastic. Again,
mm,
even though the rules aren't that great, people still want to bring big tanks. And then, as I say, hopefully we get something new into plastic as
mm,
well, alongside progressing the line of bringing everything up to one spec. Because it makes sense to me. Um, Obviously, Legion's had a big push this year, and
mm.
it needed it. It needs to be in its place, and maybe we'll see. I don't know kind of how far we off having got most Legion stuff out now, haven't we?
Yeah, so in terms of stuff
Yeah,
that has rules,
I'm
there's stuff
obviously they'll
that's
give us.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
there's things obviously that exist. I mean, there's stuff that doesn't have rules but has pictures in the books, like the
yes,
Sakara and Venator, for example. There's pictures of those, and they feature fairly heavily in the storyline of the Talon book, but we don't have rules for them. We don't have models for them.
sure.
So stuff like that, yeah, there will be stuff coming out for those.
We've had 2
Or
Legions
those.
books this year. Whether we get 3 or not, I don't know. We've had one Age of Darkness book this year. Um,
Great
we've
Slaughter. That was a Great Slaughter, was now because didn't Great Slaughter and
We had Rise
Siege
of
of
Dark
Cthonia came out at the same
Mechanicum
time.
and the Great Slaughter for Legions Imperialis. Great Slaughter was previous year for Age of Darkness.
Oh, was it? Okay.
So, we got the Master of Civil War. That was the only book we got this year. Obviously, if we do get a new edition box thing, Battle for Beta Garment.
That's
Sorry,
what I'm
we
confusing
did
with.
get
I
two.
didn't
Yeah,
mean Siege of Cthonia. I
that's
meant
right.
Battle
Yeah,
for Big
well,
Garment.
we
That'll
did
be
get
on
two.
those
That's cool.
2023.
Yeah, so we got two books there. As you say, tied in with all that though. I mean, if we get two books a year, that's great. Like, I don't think that's bad.
No.
And who knows? As I say, March 20, whatever it is, I think will be a telling date one way or the other. But we know.
I
I
would
mean, we
say
know.
also there's also been as many people. Maybe that's not true. You don't want too many releases. You don't want it to be at such a rate that people reach saturation.
No,
I mean, I know
absolutely.
plenty of people who were quite happy. Were at a time of their life where they had some disposable income. They were friends of mine who were quite happy to spend on their hobby, but and there was a point where at one point, I mean, we're probably talking 10 years ago, where people were quite happy to pick up across loads of game systems, if not all the game systems, pick up all the stuff. Right. It's just enjoy a bit of that whole thing. They couldn't do that because it was just reaching a ridiculous saturation point. So they then have to start being selective over which games they're playing. Otherwise, Age of Darkness, that's the one, obviously Age of Darkness or the Horus Heresy setting in general. But if it's too rapid, it does then push you down to that. It's sort of overwhelming, and you think, right, I don't know what am I keeping up with this? Am I getting
Yeah,
this? You don't want it to go too far. I don't think. I think two books is fine, as you say. Don't think you don't have it so frequently that people are saying, "Oh no,
I
there's so
think.
many books coming out here. The rules are changing so
Yeah,
I can't keep up with this."
I think when the games shared more language, it was easier to play multiple game systems. So
Yeah, good point.
Fantasy and 40k, you knew that elves were strength 3. Didn't matter what else they are, unless they were a hero, they were strength 3. Sorry,
Mm,
toughness. They knew that all the toughness 3, unless they had one weird special rule. If they were heroes, they were strength 3, or maybe strength 4 rather than toughness 3, or a few special occasions. You knew that their leadership was 8 or 9, depending on what they were. You knew they moved about 5 or 6 inches, right? So you
mm,
could transfer that knowledge across multiple game systems. With the way the game systems are now, I just don't think you can play a huge amount of Games Workshop game systems
yeah.
without to that level, because the information is so different across all of them. So I think that problem is not just monetary. I think it's actually shifted. Um, I also
Well, I mean,
think that,
yes, I agree, but I think
and
that possibly linked to frequency of release
sure,
rather than to
I also
monetary. It's i.e. the amount of content you're putting out
yes,
makes the game diverge.
yeah. There's the two reasons for it, and but what I'm saying is, even trying to compete, if you could afford to buy anything, I don't think it's as manageable as it used to be to play 8 game systems. I play a lot of game
Agreed.
systems. It's hard
Completely
to
agree.
maintain. Um, Alongside that, Games Workshop have grown to the point where you do have the people who only play one game system. Therefore, you have to maintain releases for those
Mm,
people. You also have to
mm,
maintain releases for people who are getting new into the game. And I hazard a
mm,
guess that most of the people that you know who now can't keep up have got reasonable armies of various
mm,
things.
mm.
So, because you don't get into 5 game systems at once.
No, no, you've got
So,
that's an interesting point.
so I come and play Horus Heresy, and there's nothing new for me for 4 months. Well, okay. I only play Horus Heresy. You haven't given me anything. So
Mm,
you're right. They don't want to go too quick, but they've got to keep people interested.
mm,
And importantly for this edition, which is supposedly selling great guns, I look around, making sure that those people have got something to buy. Um,
mm.
which again has
And
another issue with
keeping
GW stock.
momentum up. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, keeping
Um,
momentum up and keeping pushing forward with something, keeping the energy up around it, and saying, well, actually, this is something I want to both collect, play, and
yeah.
do something with. Mm.
And Games Workshop's been constant. I don't think they've done a bad job in terms of maintaining their release schedules across the different games.
Hmm.
I think you could viably argue something particularly like Blood Bowl. How many is two teams being released in a year enough with a few star
Hmm.
players? I think you can have a viable argument. It's between two or three. If you're pushing four out, there's only 24 teams or whatever it is.
Hmm.
They're almost at the end of the cycle. Are they putting out a new game and then going back to models which are really good because they're not that old, like
Hmm.
to put out a lot of stuff, or do they just not put anything out for it? Do you want, as a Blood Bowl player, do you want them to get to the end and go, cool, we're not putting any models out for you? Because then there's nothing for you to buy for you. Obviously, they can put out other bits and pieces, but um, but again, for the new player, they don't get to see anything new. So then you're just got stuff. Stuff online which other people have, and part of GW's challenge as they push forward is, particularly with games like Blood Bowl, and Heresy, is we want to get stuff up and it's our IP and we want to sell it. We don't want to wait 4 months, allow everyone else to copy it or change it
Hmm.
slightly, put out theirs, and then our market diminishes.
It's where
So
Necromunda again becomes a very interesting consideration, because you could have that. There's an infinite number of gangs that you can do, or gang
yeah,
equivalents that you can keep doing, and that's before you start thinking, as they seem to be doing, of actually let's have a look at a different setting. Let's go
yeah,
and set the next. Let's do a whole box based around the ash wastes and a variant of the game. Effectively, let's do another less of a variant of the game, but a different setting. We go to a different hive, which has got an entirely different culture and setting in it. That's got almost endless
yeah,
expandability.
absolutely.
Compare that as a specialist game. I used the term loosely.
Mm,
Compare that with Titanicus.
yeah,
What do you
it's got
do with
very
Titanicus?
finite.
You
Yeah,
can't keep releasing models, and
no,
it's this point you make about Games Workshop had a bit of an issue where someone who's been playing for 20, 30 years has collected 20,000 points of Dark Angels, because that's what they collected since they were 15. Um, are they going to rebuy all of those in a completely different armor mark, or whatever else it might be? Are they going to do that? Maybe they keep adding to that, or do they just say, no, I'm going to keep using my second edition
mm,
lead Space Marines that I got? I expect to still be able to use my Devastator squad, etc., in that particular way. Their market kind of prefers, this is, you hear this, the move in 40k particularly, well, we'd actually rather you be playing with combat patrols. Boxes that you go and buy a new one of those every quarter, something like that, maybe whatever, it doesn't matter the frequency. You're buying different things, and then you're collecting across multiple factions, multiple things. You're more likely to have to keep spending and keep it driving forward. How do you do that with a different type of game entirely, like Heresy, for example? And I would argue that's where you're saying about having different unit types and different vehicles or things like that. There's enough of a back catalogue that they can fit them in at the moment, but it will become an exciting, exciting in a different way, much like we had in the past, where every now and again, fairly certainly annually, you were getting a hint that they were working on a whole new type of vehicle or unit, or
yeah.
otherwise. At that time, we were also looking at where legions hadn't been looked at in detail, and yet there was an excitement there. It's like, oh my goodness,
It-
it's book whatever. We're going to be looking at the Thousand Suns and the Space Wolves, so this is super
yeah.
exciting in itself.
So
How do you recreate that kind of enthusiasm?
we obviously still have Custodes,
Mm,
and Sisters of Silence, and potentially a Dark Mechanicum, uh,
mm.
kind of to dive into. 40k are getting some form of Dark Mechanicum, aren't they? Trying to remember now.
Well, they've got they've got a new god-ish kind of thing,
Yeah, I
Ashur.
got Vash Dark, but I thought there was maybe there was some like teasers. It could be one of those things. There's always a kind of rumor that Dark Mechanicum are coming to 40k, but Who
I've heard
no.
that rumor too, but I've not. I'm not
I
aware
mean,
of
I've heard
anything
that
that's.
rumor for donkey's years.
Yeah, true. Yeah,
So,
I
I'm
haven't
just trying to
heard
remember
about it materialising into anything.
what I know. But I mean, I can see them doing it, and the Star is obviously a vehicle that could potentially do that, but they could do it a number of ways as well. But 40k are expanding on their factions involved, so
Mm.
that could certainly happen
I
because
think it's
sometimes,
really. I think it's really interesting to see how one sort of release, if you like, the one in some cases, one preview can totally change what appears to be the public reaction or the fan
yeah,
base's reaction, or at least a proportion of it, or whatever, enough to make it seem like there's an upswell. That preview that they did, where they showed off Krieg and Eldon for 40k in particular, seemed to do so much for reinvigorating an enthusiasm in 40k and people doing it. But prior to that, there was a real sense of, oh, actually, I'm going to put 40k down. You heard loads of people who you were perhaps following or otherwise was just like, no, actually, I'm not super interested in 40k right now. I'm going to go and look at this or that or whatever. Be that completely different games companies or just different games within Games Workshop, and then that preview seemed to change that conversation about 40k. Suddenly, there was lots of people talking about that and looking forward to it. And that's just a preview. They haven't released the things
yeah,
yet. Interesting, you can turn that quickly.
yeah, big
On a bit
time.
of a dime.
So yeah, I don't know. What am I looking forward to? So 2025. What are you hoping? What would be kind of like one, two or three kind of? I want that.
I could be. I'm surprised at this. I would be really. I would love to see them do what they've done with Solar Mechanicum, and they do it with Custodes or Talons of the Emperor, shall we say, and
Yeah,
Demons. And I don't think they will. But I would love it if they went down that route where they just keep going with the additional factions
sure.
to mix up the game. I think that would be super interesting, and I think it would add a variety to it, particularly as it would be an interesting alternative to what what they're rumored to be doing in 40k, where they're doing away with demons as a standalone thing, other than something that's supported in Legends or whatever the equivalent of that is.
Yeah, it's interesting
Where they're
for
going to do it,
40k.
allegedly they're going to fold them into, Slaaneshi demons will fold into the Emperor's children and all the other
Just
god specific things.
particularly in 40k, I think that probably should always have been done. Like,
Mm,
it just feels like chaos should be legions of chaos. Like, it should
mm,
be everything. Space Marines, humans, like the lot, like chaos
mm,
fights like that in the books all the time, and then you could maintain heresy as independent armies because again, that seems to work a little bit better in heresy. Uh,
mm,
I I would love them to do one of the new another new army.
mm,
I did see some talk about diversity, splitting the custodes out. And whether they're bringing new custody models to 40k or the vice versa, I don't know. Who knows? I mean, it's all talk. Who knows? But I really would like to see, having seen what they've done with the Indomitus Terminators in 40k. I want
mm,
to see Tartarus at that size, Cataphracti at that
mm.
size. I don't want Saturnine Terminators. I don't particularly like them.
No, so.
I think I've seen one 3D print style that I don't mind, but just the actual, they just look a bit derpy to me, and
Mm,
I think they're the biggest thing that people call out that I completely disagree on.
mm,
So I'd like to see the Terminators in Big and a new thing. What do I just I want to see something new. I want to see something that's
mm,
different. Um, Don't know how. Like like when they dropped the Saber and the Arquita. Like something's
Exactly.
like, oh,
Exactly.
cool. I want to see that.
Yeah,
And
I'd like to see that, and I'd like to see it in such a way that it doesn't feel like a weird one-off. Like almost like an indicator that
Sure.
we're moving into that era, I think would be great.
Cool. I don't really mind. I would just like to see something that's not what we know
Mm.
available.
Mm.
Again, just shifts it up again. Would be super cool.
I sort of feel like that is more likely to, and I almost kind of want this to happen more, partly because I love the scale. I'd love to see them, as we've already talked
Mm.
about, do that in Legions. I'd like to see those things
Oh,
we haven't seen. I'd like to see them start to come out in Legions. I'd like to see the Mechanicus Ordinatus Majoris start to
yeah.
come
Oh,
out in
yeah.
that.
I
I'd
want to
like to
see
see
demons.
bonkers big things.
I said it before. I'll say again. I want to see demons in Legions. They
Mm,
don't have
mm,
to be. It doesn't have to be a full army list of pure demons. It could be like Legions, really, when you have traitors and an army list that allows you to do a corrupted traitor legion, where you can ally in deep and make it full kind of um, full legions of the damned and
mm.
legions and yeah, corn towers or silver towers or
Yeah,
plague
exactly. Yeah.
plague beasts and all that kind of stuff in legions um,
Mm.
would be totally awesome. But who knows? Maybe they're not ready for that yet. And then for AT, I want a second edition. I just want a book.
Completely. Yeah.
Just write me a book. I don't care if we don't get another model. Just give me a book. I don't get me wrong. I would love another model. I would love the rapier, please.
Mm, mm.
So long ago. Um, I'd love the rapier, but if you give me a second edition book, if that's all I got this year, a tidied up rule set, be all over it.
Yeah, I
But
agree with that. I'm trying to think
I'm
of
not.
what would be a
I'm not
realistic,
going to put a
what would be
pound
a
on
way of giving that game a shot in the arm. No, annoying. Sadly, I think you're
it.
right, but
A
it
shot.
would be. Mm,
I think if you released a revised edition rulebook, that's all it needs. Doesn't need new rules. Needs to revise it and iron a few things out. You'd sell more Titans straight away.
I agree with that. Yeah, I agree with
Particularly
that.
if
I'm
you
just wondering if there's something
readdress
they could do to make people who've already got Titans buy more.
readdress the weapons options. Not everyone
Mm.
magnetizes their Titans.
No, true. That's true.
So
That's true.
you readdress that, and all of a sudden, and also you readdress some of the maniples,
Mm.
how they work, because again, some people own 8 Warhounds, 3 Reavers,
Mhm.
1 Warlord. But if you can convince them that there's an interesting or Warlord thing where they don't like the ones that are around, all of a sudden they buy 2
Mm.
more Warlords and the
Mm.
reverse as well. Um,
Yeah,
and
and maybe
yeah,
one new Titan to go along with that.
and
To go
people
along
don't
with that
buy.
thinking, and you just
Yeah,
that would be that would be a relatively small investment, i.e., you're not having to invest in new models in terms of Games Workshop having to design and manufacture the things.
hmm,
You could do it, so you wouldn't have to do that. You just do one, maybe one that
yeah,
can be dual built, like something like that, and away you go. That would
yeah.
be cool. But
I mean,
I think,
even
as you
just a
said, the
rapier,
likeliness of
as you
that.
say, would be great. But also,
Mm,
if you revise the way banners work, the way knights work, how many people haven't bought a knight army
mm,
because knights are janky? Like whether
mm,
they're good or not is irrelevant. They're janky. They work different, too different
mm,
almost, and it's a
mm,
bit weird. I've got a load of knights actually, and if it wasn't for Legions Imperialis, I'd be selling a lot of them because I'm never going to use them in the way
mm,
that I originally wanted to. Um, So again, if you change the night rules, you maybe sell more nights. And don't get me
mm,
wrong, I'm not saying it's not. I'm not saying it's an easy job to just go to a book and revise it. But compared to going out and writing a new book, right? Like the basis is there, and there's
mm,
still there's players out there to go to talk to get to use for testing and things like that. They've got a system that would work on that. But
mm.
who knows? Who knows? I can keep banging that drum. Andy, if you're listening, just give me the book and I'll shut up,
We don't have
please.
to
And he'll
don't have to
go,
say this every quarter.
I could just imagine next time I see him go, well, Greg, here are the reasons why we're not doing that. But I don't care. I don't care. The company's successful enough. It's going to work. It'll be fine. Convince whoever you need to convince that it would revitalise AT.
Do you think that rather than release another version of AT, do you think they'll go a different route and release a new game? For example, a spaceship game?
Not yet with Legions.
Legions is too new.
Maybe. I'm just trying to think. When was the game they did before that? What have they done before Legions? What was the new game?
The Age of Darkness.
Age of Darkness. Yeah, no, it's
Age of
been a
Darkness.
while,
Age
hasn't
of
it?
Darkness is 22. Legions is 23. End of 23.
Yeah, and Old World as well.
Yes. When did that
As,
come out? 24. Did that come out this year?
it was late, wasn't it? So it was
Yes.
late 23, early 24 because it was delayed. Um, I think it might be 23, and then Legions got delayed even further. But who knows? Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are pieces of paper out there. There are the computer files with ideas and things. Whether it's a full game system or whether it's a boxed, contained game, I don't even know if they're that far along. Who knows? I mean, I don't know anything. But yeah, they
Yeah, only
certainly could
base
be.
speculation. There's an awful. I think there's a fair bit of overlap, mechanics wise. That's sort of fundamentally different, obviously, but there's a certain amount of overlap between the way Titanicus presents itself and the way
Yeah,
a spaceship game probably would. Particularly where if it, obviously it's easy. You make reference. One makes reference to Battlefleet Gothic. That had kind of three
sure.
classes of ship. You had escorts, you had cruisers, you had battleships. You could have a battleship kit, a cruiser kit. You wouldn't even have to have, as they did with Battleship Gothic, Chaos and Imperial. You could just do, as they've done with Titanicus, a big ship, a medium ship, and a small ship,
Yeah.
and it works for both. It works for all factions in Battlefleet Heresy, for argument's sake. The
Well,
idea of just a ship lumbering around and firing and lobbing shells at each other is kind of what I mean.
yeah. I
Titanicus
mean,
is land
Titanic.
battleships.
Yeah,
It's
exactly. Yeah.
the two, rather than do a second edition of Titanicus, you just say,
No,
well, all
I
those
still
models are being
no,
sold as LI now. It's a Battlefleet
no,
Gothic instead.
no. Give me Titanicus.
I agree
Anyway,
with you
at that
completely.
point, we're going to call it there because I don't think it's Magnus's fault, but there is a rodent of some kind running around the house. So, yeah, cats, people, cats. So, and Willow and Magnus are probably just looking at it, going, "Oh, look what we got." I won't actually catch it for you. So we're going to call it there. And thank you, Howard.
A pleasure. A pleasure. We'll speculate more as we go into 2020.
Always, always. You've made it to the end of another episode of the Imperial Truth podcast. Thank you for listening. We did want to do an FAQ aspect or segment on this show. Unfortunately, we only got a few in. Time was running short. We're going to push that back. So if you've got any questions for the FAQ, if you've got any topics or subjects, anything really that you want to get in touch with us, then you can email Greg at theimperialtruth.com. You can also contact us on Instagram at Chardafang, Twitter at Imperial_Truth, and on the Facebook page, search for Imperial Truth. You will find us there. So you can do all that. As I say, if you've got any questions that you want to send in and have us answer or ruminate about or what have you, then please feel free to do so. It'll be good to get them in from you guys. As I say, we have got the Warhammer merch link, we've got the Element link, we've got the Battle Bling link, we have got the What else are we doing? There's too many different things, and it's all great. We've got all the different links. The best place to find them at the moment is there's a link tree on the Twitter. I need to also get that organised in more visible in other places, which I will do. You've got all the links to that. They're all in the show notes as well. So if you want to support the show, the Patreon, that's what I was going to talk about. So if you want to support the show in any way, shape, or form, whether it's buying your miniatures, whether it's buying merch, whether it's directly supporting the Patreon, thank you very much for doing that. If you want to tell other people about the show, that's brilliant as well. Absolutely brilliant. I'm not sure what we got lined up for the next episode. I will have to message Howard and we can talk about that. As I say, it's going to be an interesting year ahead. I feel for Heresy. It's going to be I've just got a feeling that we're going to have some interesting stuff to be dealing with, which is not necessarily a bad thing. So we'll have to see how that goes. Let us know what you're doing with the Heresy as well. That's another thing. Just let us know what you're doing, what you've got big plans for 2025. I'm going to be at Adepticon this year. I need to book flights. But I've booked my hotel. I've booked my lift up there from Chicago. So I'm not sure what I'm going to be doing there once I'm there. But please feel free if you're there. If you're going to be there, then it'll be good to see some people. And yeah, maybe we'll get. Obviously we had Zach on to talk about Heresy there last time. He did want me to tell there's another track. There's lots of tracks for Heresy, lots of stuff that you can choose to do. So exciting times. Anyway, I'm properly rambling, so that's always a good note to leave it on. Until next time, you have been listening to The Imperial Truth.